Chapter 411, Going Sightseeing. Hong Kong has a dense population and lots of celebrities with high social status. Among them, in addition to those who are well known, many are invisible rich people. No one knows how many assets they have, but every day they are demonstrating spending money like water with real actions. When money accumulates to a certain extent, it becomes just a number in the eyes of its owner. Someone like Liu Qingfeng would encounter the bottleneck of development at this stage, and for them, the importance of social connections and supporters would gradually increase. Someone, though worth millions themselves, could raise billions in a day through their horrifying social connections. It could be seen how important social connections were. As for martial arts masters, they were special since the title was born dignified with a wide range of social connections, since everyone wanted to have a good relationship with a powerful master. However, Zhang Han didn't care about this. He valued full freedom and the right to do whatever he wanted. For example, knowing Zhao Feng was a man of high quality, Zhang Han accepted him as the first disciple. Seeing that Sun Ming express his kindness to Meng Meng, Zhang Han decided to cure him. This was the joy of doing whatever he wanted. After hearing Zhao Feng's words, Zhang Han pondered and then nodded. Auction it. Okay, I'll arrange it. Lin's just told me that the Wangking Auction Company of the Lin Group wanted to auction this membership card, Zhao Feng said. Okay. Zhang Han nodded. Auctioning a restaurant's membership card would lead to a lot of discussion, and if it could be sold at a super high price, it would attract even more attention. Of course, Ling's would strive for this good opportunity to promote her company. Although there were some competitors in the same trade as the Lin Group, Ling's believed that they would get the auction right, since the one in a favorable position gained special advantages. Mr. Zhang, this is the Mojian tea in my collection. Wang Long put a tea set on the tea table. After a series of steps, several cups of tea were served to the guests. Wang Ming, who liked to drink tea, nodded with satisfaction, took the cup, and tasted it. Well, the tea is fragrant with a high quality. It's almost the same as my father's collection. Zhang Han didn't know much about tea. After drinking it, he felt that it tasted like water. Xian, Zif, and Rong Jiaxin didn't know much about tea, either. But they could feel the high quality of the tea. Wang Juin took a sip and closed his eyes for a few seconds. Then he opened his eyes and said, if I'm not mistaken, it's blue sky and jade leaves, right? Feeling it quite funny, Wang Ming shook his head and said, look at the shape of the leaves, and you will know what kind of tea it is. That's right. Wang Juin smiled awkwardly. It seems that the two gentlemen are also tea fanciers. Wang Long nodded slightly at them and then introduced it. This is indeed the blue sky and jade leaves of Xianyang Mojian, which I once photographed in the mainland. This time, I specially brought it to Mr. Zhang for tasting. Thank you. Zhang Han nodded and smiled. Since Mr. Zhang is back, will I go back to Meng Meng Security tomorrow? Wang Long asked with a smile. Okay, replied Zhang Han. The renovation of the nightclubs and restaurant over there was almost complete, and they would be put into operation soon. It was also called Meng Meng's Recreational Restaurant, Shop Number 2. Zhang Han was happy to see this. Now there were more and more customers every day, and some of them could be diverted to the branch restaurant as long as Wang Long could guarantee the quality of the dishes. In this way, the main restaurant would be much quieter. Zhang Han's idea was very good, but some things would go against his wishes. After a few words of conversation, Wang Long left. Although he didn't know Zhang Han's identity in the martial arts world, he saw so many high-ranking people come to line up honestly these 2 days, which helped him to understand Zhang Han's status. At first, Wang Long was a little confused. Did the news of his coming to the restaurant get out so quickly? However, as the identity of the people in line became more and more unusual, Wang Long found that these celebrities did not come to the restaurant for him. This made Wang Long more curious about the identity of the restaurant owner and admire him even more. Regardless of his high status, Zhang Han was willing to run a small restaurant here, which showed that he was really enjoying life. However, Wang Long didn't pay much attention to these things because he came here mainly to enjoy the best ingredients. As a chef, the happiest thing for him was that the diners could enjoy his cooking, and in Meng Meng's recreational restaurant, he could obviously get all the pleasures, like if a fish that had gone into the water again. In the past, because of the limitation of food materials, Wang Long couldn't give full play to his cooking skills. Now, he felt as if the door of a new world was opening in front of him. This was what he pursued. After Wang Long left, two little girls playing with toys ran up to Zhang Han. "Papa, do you want to play eagle and chicken?" Meng Meng ran up to Zhang Han's leg and asked, her big eyes blinking. Zhang Han saw the expectation for the game in her eyes. "What? How did you know I wanted to play eagle and chicken?" Zhang Han asked, pretending to be surprised. "I guessed. I want to play, too," Meng Meng said happily. "Then let's start." Zhang Han reached out his right hand with a smile and touched Meng Meng's pink cheek, then he raised his eyes and swept around the room. "Ah, come and play the game," Zif said in a hurry. Ziyan smiled, rolled her eyes at Zhang Han, and then stood up. Zhang Li put down her mobile phone. Wang Jian and Su Yu were the first to stand up. This made Wang Ming slightly stunned. What has happened? While the adults are having fun drinking tea and chatting here, why do they suddenly start to play eagle and chicken? Generally speaking, how can parents agree to play this kind of game? I've once been fooled in this way, not to mention that such a group of adults. Come here quickly. Rong Jiaxin waved to Wang Ming. "Ah, here I am." Wang Ming stood up and walked over, feeling rather strange. While approaching the group of adults, Wang Ming gave himself a wry smile. Han, he is really a good father. With more contact, Wang Ming felt that Zhang Han never refused the request of Meng Meng. Even if some requirements were unnecessary, Zhang Han would agree with her. If there were some unreasonable requests, it was Ziyan who refused Meng Meng. Wang Ming felt that Zhang Han was a little too fond of Meng Meng. Aren't fathers usually strict? Wang Ming's father was so strict that he used to beat him, which had made him a dutiful son now. Thinking about it, Wang Ming felt a little sad. Wang Ya was never treated so gently when she was a child. If he taught her daughter like Zhang Han, maybe. Now he only hoped that Wang Ya could marry a good man and have a child in the future, so that he could also experience the feeling of obedience to the younger generation. So all the adults accompanied the two little girls and played for a while. The second floor of the restaurant was full of laughter, mostly from the two little guys. After playing for a while, Meng Meng and Wang Yihan began sweating, and the adults ended the game. When they sat on the sofa again, Wang Ming looked at Wang Jian and Su Yu and found that they seemed to be used to the scene. At about 9 o'clock in the evening, Wang Jian and Su Yu went home with Wang Yihan, who was reluctant to leave. The rest of the adults chatted for a little while longer. "I'm a little sleepy," Zhang Li yawned and said, "Brother, I'll take them to the company to have a rest." "Okay," Zhang Han nodded, looked at Rong Jiaxin, and said, "Have a good sleep. Let's go climbing tomorrow morning, and go to the sea in the afternoon to search for treasure." "Okay." Rong Jiaxin nodded, and didn't think much about searching for treasures. Instead, she looked at Meng Meng and said with a smile, "Meng Meng, say goodbye to your grand-aunt." "Good night, grand-aunt." Meng Meng waved goodbye to the three of them. When they went downstairs, Zhao Feng, who was sitting beside them, also stood up. After they went through the door, they got in the long Rolls-Royce Phantom. Zif thought it was not interesting to go back to the apartment alone, so she went with them. They drove for more than 10 minutes then arrived at the company. At this time, the company was ablaze with lights. The decorative lights on the exterior walls and the lights on the lower floors were all on. Meng Meng's security. They got out of the car and looked up at the bright sign on top of the building. "You have so many luxury cars, are they all my cousins?" As soon as she got out of the car, Wang Ya was dazzled when she saw a line of luxury cars around her. The closest to her were three Lamborghini supercars. She knew that one of them was worth over 10 million yuan and the other two were worth nearly 10 million. Other cars included the Rolls-Royce Phantom, Bentley, and so on, while the cheapest one was the Mercedes-Benz S600. Wang Ya thought of the Wang family's Land Rover team, none of which cost more than 2 million yuan. They all belong to the boss, Zhao Feng replied with a chuckle. There are several limited cars over there. Look at the black Maybach Excelero. The only one in the world, and it was sent to the boss as a gift. That car is a Bugatti Black Bess, and there are only 3 in the world. I drive the Maserati on the side, Zhang Li replied simply. As Zhang Han's sister, Zhang Li was proud to see her brother's achievement. Generally no one drives these cars. Yeah, you can drive whichever you want. My brother usually drives the panda car in front of the restaurant, Zhang Li added. Is that panda car my cousin's? How does he like that car? Wang Ya was surprised. How can he leave so many luxury cars aside and drive that panda car worth merely tens of thousands of yuan? Because Meng Meng likes it. Zhao took over the topic and said with a smile, you will know what Meng Meng means to my brother-in-law if you live here for a long time. Well, I already feel it, Wang Ming said, looking at the building. Is this building yours? This building and the whole area are owned by the company. The square on the right is the outdoor DJ square that is under construction. The land behind has just been bought by us. We are going to rebuild it into a small airport. The construction will start in the coming days, replied Zhao Feng. All right. Wang Ming grinned and said nothing more. Han seems to be so rich, said Rong Jiaxin. Well, yes, replied Zhao Feng. In fact, Zhang Han's assets were not as many as the top rich people. He just spent money bravely and casually. Zhao Feng was spending money madly at Zhang Han's request recently. All kinds of reconstruction, materials, car purchases, and so on of the company required money. Though the company had not opened yet, their working capital was less than 600 million, and all kinds of projects still needed follow-up investments. Besides, Zhang Han even planned to buy 2 planes, but Zhao Feng didn't know if Zhang Han's savings were enough. Fortunately, Zhang Han said that they would go to search for treasures tomorrow, and Zhao Feng knew that they would get a larger income this time since it was arranged by Zhang Han himself. It used to be a CBD building. Liu Qingfeng bought it and later gave it to the boss as an investment. He owned a few shares in the building, Zhao Feng said. Liu Qingfeng. Wang Ming was stunned. He knew who Liu Qingfeng was, so he smiled and shook his head. If he can maintain a good relationship with Han, he should be able to go further. The 2nd floor and 3rd floor are training grounds, and the 7th and 9th floors are accommodation areas. Zhao Feng introduced it. The rooms here are all deluxe suites. Not bad. I usually stay on the 9th floor, Zhang Li interposed. That sounds good. Rong Jiaxin smiled. Whether it was in martial arts or business, she felt that Zhang Han was great. On the 2nd and 3rd floors, the lights are on. Is there anyone else training at this time? Wang Ming asked curiously. Yes. They usually train until 11. Zhao Feng nodded. Isn't that too exhausting? Wang Ya grinned. No, they enjoy it. I'll train later, Zhao Feng replied with a smile. Let's take a look first. Wang Ming was curious. So they first went to the 2nd floor. In a large room, more than 70 people were standing orderly and performing movements. So many people, are they all? Wang Ming was stunned. Yes, they are all martial artists. Zhao Feng nodded. What do their movements mean? Wang Ming asked. These movements are taught by the master, Zhao Feng explained. They are not all security guards. The security group has 51 men in total including me, and nearly 60 others come from the army. The army? Rong Jiaxin and Wang Ya were also curious. How do soldiers train with you? Wang Ming asked. Zhao Feng hesitated and said, because my master is a general. Poof. Wang Ming coughed violently and looked at Zhao Feng with a bit of shock. He is a general? Huh? My brother-in-law is a general? Zif also heard it for the first time, and her eyes widened. My brother is a general. Zhang Li was slightly shocked and felt more proud. Ah, my cousin is a general. Wang Ya was shocked. It's just a title of honor, and master doesn't need to manage the affairs of the army. His main task is to train the wolf-head detachment. Zhao Feng grinned at their expression and said, in addition to the title of general, my master is now the second director of the National Security Agency of Hong Kong. Poof! Wang Ming choked on saliva again. He could say nothing and just stood there dumbfounded. Rong Jiaxin was completely stunned at this time. There were only a few words left in her mind. General. Director. Wu Dao Grand Master. Such a large company. Han is really, really brilliant. Rong Jiaxin was so happy that she couldn't help thinking about Zhang Han's parents. This made her feel a little sad because she wanted to let Zhang Han's parents have a look at their excellent son. Look, your son is so brilliant. However, it was just not the time to get together. Let's go upstairs and have a rest. Rong Jiaxin shook her head and said. They took the elevator directly to the 9th floor. Zif chose a room next to the room that Zhang Li had stayed in before. Wang Ya stayed on the left, and Rong Jiaxin and Wang Ming stayed on the left of Wang Ya's room. Zif was a little confused when he got the news. She remembered that when she and Sister Yan returned to the motherland, her brother-in-law was in a shabby and messy rental house in the capital, dressed in old clothes and eating instant noodles. Only 2 months had passed since then. General, Director, Grand Master. What made Zhang Han achieve such a leap forward in promotion in just 2 months? She faintly felt that all this was because of the little princess Meng Meng. Is it because of Meng Meng that my brother-in-law decided to start a business? Zif was lying in bed thinking. Obviously she still needed some time to digest the news. Back at the restaurant. After everyone left, Zhang Han went downstairs and locked the door. And then he went upstairs to coax Meng Meng to sleep. The room also fell into silence. Suddenly, the door of the master bedroom was opened, and Zhang Han hurried to the second bedroom with Xian in his arms. He closed the door. At first, there was no sound, but then, there was an uncontrollable whimpering sound coming from the second bedroom. Although the sound insulation in the room was very good, the sound could also be clearly heard. Obviously, it was even louder inside the room. The sound lasted for a long time. At last, in the middle of the night, there was a sound of water in the bathroom. Then the master bedroom door opened and the whole suite was quiet again. Zhang Han went to sleep contentedly with Xian in his arms. In addition to the first time when something strange happened, the other several times were quite normal, which made Zhang Han very happy. Until now, Zhang Han did not understand why that mysterious and profound energy could help his 5-inch Danshan advance to a 10-inch Dantian only heard in legends, which would enable him to break the shackles of physiology and make his body reach the perfect state. This had improved Zhang Han's strength and, more importantly, his talent. With a 5-inch Danshan, he couldn't kill He Qingshan so easily in the Battle of Strange Peak Island. But 10-inch Danshan could not only enable him to do so, but also help him defeat Xiang Qishan. Although Zhang Han couldn't detect the abnormality in Xian's body for the time being, he would uncover the mystery one day. No matter what the reason was, he would not let Xian and Meng Meng be affected. Zhang Han slowly fell asleep with Xian in his arms. At 6 o'clock the next morning, Zhang Han got up to make small steamed buns and mixed congee for breakfast. At about 7:30 a.m., Wang Ming and the others came to the restaurant. After breakfast, they went to Mount New Moon. After stopping at the intersection at the foot of the mountain, the group rushed up the mountain. The terrain of this mountain is nice and flat. Wang Ming looked at Mount New Moon and said with a smile, "The view at the top of the mountain is better. You'll see later," Zhang Li replied. When they went into the jungle and got to the lawn, hiss, hiss, hiss. Wang Ming took a deep breath and keenly felt the difference. The air here is very fragrant. the humidity is good, and the temperature is lower than outside, a Garden of Eden. Why is the lawn so soft? What kind of grass is this? He asked. He squatted down curiously, touched the lawn, plucked a piece of grass, looked at it, and chewed it. Why are you eating grass, granduncle? Meng Meng was shocked. Cough, just to have a taste. Wang Ming grinned, looked at Zhang Han, and said, I don't think I've seen this kind of grass. What kind of grass is it? It's just more fragrant grass, Zhang Han responded and put Meng Meng down. Big hi, little hi, I'm coming. Meng Meng ran forward happily. Ooh, 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 woo. 2 happy calls came from the back mountain. Wang Ming was stunned. The pets are really smart. Ah, the flowers over there are so beautiful. Wang Ya found the sea of flowers on the right and was immediately attracted. It's beautiful indeed. Rong Jiaxin nodded. Aunt, I'll take you there. The shape of the flowers is very special. Xian smiled and led them to the flower sea. Ha ha, my brother-in-law is romantic. Yeah, have you seen the video of confession that was very popular on the internet some time ago? Lights, balloons, a rain of petals, fireworks. Zif said with a smile. Ah, I've seen it. That's what my brother-in-law did. Wang Ya opened her eyes wide in surprise, and suddenly realized that she had made a mistake. The girl blushed and shook her head quickly. No, cousin, it was my cousin that did that. Chapter 412, The Sunken Treasure. Of course, said Zif, who was shaking her head from side to side proudly. Wow! In addition to Zhang Han, Wang Ming, and Zhao Feng, all the women on the scene ran to enjoy the flowers. Just then, a black figure came running like lightning. It was Little Hai, and its speed scared Wang Ming. This is a spirit beast. Wang Ming's ending sound turned into a trill. It could be imagined how shocked Wang Ming was. Yes, replied Zhang Han. At the same time, a huge figure leapt from the top of the mountain. Ooh, 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 ooh. Dai excitedly roared a few times, and with all fours pushing hard on the ground, rushed over to them. Question mark. Wang Ming stared at Dai blankly. It is so tall. I thought it was a joke when Meng Meng said that it was taller than Papa. I didn't expect that it was actually more than 2 meters. Is it also a spirit beast? A surprising thought came to him. Well, Dai is very fierce and I'm not its match. It's a little grumpy to outsiders, as both my instructor and I have been beaten by it. Uncle Wang. You better watch out, Zhao Feng whispered to warn Wang Ming. Ah? Wang Ming turned his head to look at Zhao Feng and said suspiciously, do you think I can't defeat it? Wang Ming's words stunned Zhao Feng because he forgot that Wang Ming was a chi strength master. I can't beat you, Zhang Han chuckled and said, it's at the top stage of peak strength now. Top stage of peak strength, hiss. Wang Ming shivered and stared at Dai. His eyes lit up after he took a breath of cool air. Good, good, the spirit beast is really good. Ha ha, its offspring must be gifted. Wang Ming looked at Zhang Han, his eyes glowing with excitement. How powerful it would be to have a spirit beast for a bodyguard. He even began to think about when Dai would have a baby. Zhang Han was amused by Wang Ming and didn't know what to say. The higher the level of the spirit beast, the lower the ability to produce offspring, but the spirit beast had innate cultivation advantages indeed. For example, not only could Dai advance continuously, but also its baby would be born as a high-level spirit beast. However, the premise of all this was, in order to have a baby, Dai first had to find a female gorilla. Whoa, whoa. Dai stared at Wang Ming with its mouth twitching. He is looking at me in a strange way. Just ignore him, I'll play with my little master. So it moved its mouth a few times, put Meng Meng on its shoulder, and walked back to the mountain. What's the level of that big dog? Wang Ming looked at Little Hai's back and wanted to whistle for it to come over, sit down, and extend its paws. It's also at the stage of peak strength, replied Zhang Han. This Wang Ming's lips quivered. He wanted to say something but failed. What he saw and heard today was beyond his imagination. How is Han so promising? He even has 2 spirit beasts. It was really enviable. On the other side, Wang Yi and Rong Jiaxin were checking out the flowers without noticing Dai and Little Hai. They lingered for a long time, and finally continued to walk up the mountain. What kind of tree is this? Why is it so tall? Cool. Wang Ming looked up at the Thunder Yang tree in front of him and exclaimed, "What I've seen and heard today makes me feel that I have lived in vain for decades. Uncle Wang, I was in the same mood when I first came here." Zhao Feng smiled. Every person who came to Mount New Moon for the first time would look at the new world like a newborn baby. The same is true of my first visit. Me too. Zhao and Zhang Li agreed with Zhao Feng. They still remembered their surprise and joy when they first came here. Although they were used to it now, they still enjoyed the environment and beautiful scenery every time they came to the mountain. Ah, such a gorilla, such a big dog, and so many pets. When Wang Ya saw the pet area in the back mountain, she cried softly, "Is Meng Men too close to them, Yan? They have bacteria, after all." Rong Jiaxin saw Meng Meng running and jumping in the pet area, and reminded the little lady's mother with some worry. "They don't have bacteria, and Meng Men can play with them at ease," replied Zhang Han with a smile. Rong Jiaxin was a little surprised, then she smiled and shook her head. Yes, Zhang Han is so concerned about Meng Meng, how could he let her be threatened? So she smiled and went to the pet area with Zian. "Han, is that divine object you mentioned here? May I have a look?" Wang Ming rubbed his hands and asked expectantly. "You've seen it many times," replied Zhang Han. "Ah, many times? What's that?" Wang Ming stood under the Thunder Yang tree, looking left and right. "Right behind you." Zhang Han hinted at him. "Behind me?" Wang Ming hurriedly turned around and saw the Thunder Yang tree. His eyes immediately widened. "Is this tree a divine object?" he said suspiciously. "That's impossible. Shouldn't a divine object be magnificent? It is just an ordinary tree. Because I don't want the others to sense it." Zhang Han shook his head slightly. "What do you mean? Can it listen to you?" Wang Ming asked in confusion. "Yes." Zhang Han nodded. He had already refined the Thunder Yang tree and was able to control it at will. "What's the use of it?" Wang Ming looked up at the Thunder Yang tree. "It's much better than 90% of the world's divine objects. I'll show you its function." As Zhang Han smiled, there was a light flashing through his eyes. All of a sudden, the palm-sized leaves on the Thunder Yang tree shook a few times. Wang Ming exclaimed in surprise, and then closed his eyes to feel the changes. Swish! In an instant, the chi on Mount New Moon had changed a lot. Wang Ming could feel that just now, there was an ordinary tree in front of him, without any chi. Now, it seemed that there were huge waves coming at him from the direction of the tree, which made him tremble with fear. "Ouch, what is it?" he cried out, opened his eyes, stepped back a few steps, looked up at the Thunder Yang tree and exclaimed, "It's too shocking." Zhao Feng saw this and blinked in confusion. "What is going on? Why don't I feel anything? This tree is a divine object, no wonder it looks so domineering. It looks like a divine object indeed." Wang Ming said in a daze. Zhang Han smiled faintly and took a box out from his bag. This also drew the attention of Wang Ming and Zhao Feng. Clatter! The box opened, and under the gaze of Zhao Feng and Wang Ming, a golden thread rose from the box, just like a crystal rope. The two felt that it was like some liquid. This thread flew straight to the Thunder Yang tree and disappeared into its trunk. "What is this?" Wang Ming asked numbly. "In your way, it's called a holy object, spiritual marrow," replied Zhang Han. Holy object? Wang Ming's pupils contracted and his facial expression froze. But then he suddenly exclaimed, "Ah, terrible. What's wrong?" Zhang Han asked with confusion. "It ate the holy object." Wang Ming pointed to the Thunder Yang tree and said, "Holy objects are also very precious. How can you feed them to the tree, Han?" Well, Zhang Han was amused by Wang Ming and didn't know what to say. No, it can evolve, you even can feed it holy objects. Wang Ming finally realized what had happened. He smiled awkwardly, feeling himself short-sighted. All these spirit beasts and divine and holy objects are piled up in front of me. If someone else were to come see this, he may not be calmer than me. The tree doesn't eat the spiritual marrow, but absorbs it and makes the spiritual marrow play an extremely important role. Zhang Han turned and added. Another light flashed through Zhang Han's eyes, which he directed to the Thunder Yang tree. This time, with the help of Zhang Han's soul sense, the original blurry picture in his mind gradually showed the detailed topography of Mount New Moon. He could see that tens of millions of roots of the Thunder Yang tree were deeply embedded in the ground, like a network, which radiated light after absorbing the spiritual marrow. The deepest root tip began to secrete drops of spiritual marrow, and then the spiritual marrow turned into light, which was diffused in the spirit water. This made the spirit water constantly change and become viscous. Gradually, all the spirit water seemed to condense into the density of mercury and began to circulate slowly. At the same time, due to the increase of density, the concentrated spirit water began to penetrate downward, and the whole circular cave gradually became empty. Flowing down nearly 20 meters, the spirit water became more viscous and stopped in the cracks. This was the first step in the formation of a spirit crystal mine. Only through continuous evolution could spirit water agglomerate into a new spirit crystal mine. Ah, Han, is there a furnace? Wang Ming suddenly saw the 5 elements furnace on the side of the Thunder Yang tree and asked curiously. This is the 5 elements furnace. I borrowed it from Directal, Zhang Han replied. 5 elements furnace? Why does it sound familiar to me? Wang Ming thought for a while, and suddenly exclaimed, the 5 elements furnace, isn't it the most precious treasure for alchemy? Directal was willing to lend you this treasure. Han, you really have a great influence. He had heard that the 5 elements furnace was regarded as the most precious treasure by disciples of the Heavenly Elixir sect, while the chief of the Heavenly Elixir sect had his own holy furnace, and the elders all had their heaven-grade furnaces. All the sub-chiefs and core disciples were still in lack of such treasures. As a result, the 5 elements furnace was a goal for them. However, they even asked an elder to persuade Ltanan, who didn't sell them the 5 elements furnace. I didn't expect that the 5 elements furnace was here. It's unbelievable. Wait. Furnace? ? Wang Ming looked at Zhang Han in a daze. Zhang Han saw this and shook his head. Before Wang Ming could speak, he explained, yes, I know alchemy, too. Poof, how can you know alchemy, Han? All Wang Ming's saliva spurted out. After he finished speaking, Wang Ming couldn't help feeling shocked. He took a deep breath for a minute before he calmed down. Shaking his head, Wang Ming said, Han, you are indeed a talent, but you have learned arrays, alchemy, and your own martial arts, which are too much for you to digest. In fact, you only need to master one skill. The knowledge system of alchemy is so profound, and even some masters spend their lives in endless research. There is no end to learning, and the more you learn, the slower your development will be. That makes sense. Zhang Han nodded. Although he was knowledgeable, there were still many fields that he didn't know very well, such as the sudden appearance of that moon-like object in Ziyan's body and his rebirth. Zhang Han could neither understand nor find any relevant clues. The truth of these things seemed to be covered with layers of mysterious veils, which needed to be uncovered step by step. Since you know, how can you still? Wang Ming said slowly, in terms of strength. He was not qualified to educate Zhang Han, but as a relative, he still wanted to remind the young man. But before he finished his words, Zhang Han shook his head and said, in the field of alchemy, my level is much higher than it is in the field of arrays. ? Wang Ming stayed where he was, his lips quivering. but he didn't know what to say. Gulp. Wang Ming swallowed his saliva loudly and asked in a trembling voice, "Is it true?" "Yes," replied Zhang Han. The two fell into silence again. As for Zhao Feng, he was still watching them expectantly. He had passed the stage of shock a long time ago, and now the scene would only consolidate his admiration and worship of Zhang Han. After all, my master is a cultivator. Master is so awesome. After a while, Wang Ming shook his head and gave Zhang Han a forced smile. "Well, Han," he sighed, "I admire you sincerely, you are so marvelous." He felt his spiritual world and self-confidence crumbling. The more he learned about Zhang Han, the more he admired this nephew. At first, as a genius in the young generation of the Wang family, he was a little complacent, but now he was ashamed of himself. "Papa, Papa, come here." Meng Meng's call came from afar. "Dad is coming." Zhang Han looked over there, smiled softly, and walked quickly to his daughter. "Marvelous." Wang Ming looked at Zhao Feng, sighed again, and followed Zhang Han. While Zhang Han went to Meng Meng and played with the little girl, Wang Ming went over to Rong Jiaxin and whispered, "Look at that big tree, it's a divine object, a divine object." Just now, Han brought out a holy object. He has so many treasures. The 5 elements furnace is on the other side of the mountain. It's a heaven-grade treasure. Han even knows alchemy. Rong Jiaxin was also a little surprised, but more delighted. When the Kung's world opens, Han will surely be able to take back his parents and surprise those who boast of being a talent. Rong Jiaxin was full of expectation for the future. After a while, Wang Ming also calmed down and felt that his impulse had been ridiculous. He hadn't been in such a mood in many years, as if all the pent-up shocks of those years had been released today. What a Xanadu it is! Wang Ming praised it sincerely. It's Meng Meng's Xanadu. Meng Meng, who was beside Little Hai, turned around and said solemnly, "Papa built it for Meng Meng. It's specially built for Meng Meng." "Yes, it's Meng Meng's. It's specially built for Meng Meng," Zhang Han echoed with a chuckle. He looked at Meng Meng tenderly, with a happy smile on his lips. "Ha ha ha, Little Hai, let's go there." Meng Meng happily let Little Hai carry her to the side. Rong Jiaxin and the others shook their heads. Xian was also very happy. She smiled, blinked her big eyes, reached Zhang Han's ear, and whispered, "I also want a special Xanadu for me." Zhang Han narrowed his eyes, smiled, and whispered in Xian's ear, "I will build a castle for you, just on top of the mountain. I will build it overnight, leaving our traces inside, just like a witness to our love." Xian's eyes flickered and she looked affectionately at Zhang Han. Her affection made Zhang Han smile happily. If there was no one here, he could even. However, there was no if. Is this a fish pond? It's not small. There seems to be a lot of fish in it. Wang Ming stood in front of the holly trees around the fish pond and looked at it a few times. He sang his praises. Fishing here is absolutely leisurely and elegant. Zhang Han took Xian's hand, smiled, and introduced it to Wang Ming. "There are a lot of fish in it, which can be eaten now. If you are interested, you can come here to fish. I'll ask Feng to prepare some fishing gear later." "Really? That's great. It's a nice place." Wang Ming was full of praise for this place. Looking left and right, he went to the livestock area and took a lot of photos of the cattle and sheep. Besides praising Zhang Han for his good breeding, Wang Ming asked about the information of Hungarian sheep pig. Then he went to the planting area, looked at the rice and wheat, and told the others that he had planted rice when he was a child. Finally, he returned to the Thunder Yang tree, looked left and right, and began to touch the trunk, and couldn't contain his laughter. At 10:30, Zhao Feng went over and said, "Master, the freighter I arranged will arrive at the destination in about an hour. Well, let's go back for lunch and go out to sea in the afternoon to salvage the treasures." Zhang Han got up and said. So they went back home, ate lunch in the restaurant, and then went to the Deepwater Bay Yacht Club, where Zhao Feng had rented a yacht. This time it was a large yacht, and after getting the destination coordinates, it proceeded to the ocean. When they sat down on the deck chairs on the top floor, Wangzhang asked, "Han, what do you mean by salvage the treasures?" "It's a sunken ship with lots of treasures in it," Zhang Han replied. "Huh? Undersea treasure? I thought you were looking for fish or something." Wang Ya was a little surprised. The undersea treasures referred to the valuable sunken ancient pirate ship, treasure ship, or foreign trade ship. Since the ocean occupies most of the earth, the undersea treasures are rich and can be found all over the world, including both antiques for research and pure jewelry. Wang Ya remembered that she had read a report that $5 billion worth of shipwrecked treasure had been found. Because the ship broke, the treasure was gradually lost, and finally only $500 million worth of treasure was salvaged. There were also reports of other undersea treasures, with high valuations of between $1 and $2 billion, and more of hundreds of millions. Wang Ya told others what she knew, and they marveled. Zhang Han once again became the focus of attention. Is he going to get billions of dollars worth of undersea treasure? Hearing the report, Zhang Han finally shook his head and said, "It's not as much as Ya said. It's worth between $300 and $500 million. Most of it was gold, gems, and a few antiques." Zhang Han was not sure how much its total value was. After all, he didn't look at it all carefully at that time and didn't calculate the value of the night-luminescent pearls in the stone house, which must be valuable according to their quality. Moreover, he wanted to put those pearls on Mount New Moon for decoration, and didn't plan to sell them. But the amount he now estimated was surprising enough. That's about 2 billion yuan. The crowd marveled. It's so easy to make money, they thought. Since salvaging the treasure it will almost cost nothing, it was all Zhang Han's net profit. Wang Ming thought of the speed of making money with his own enterprise, and his mouth quivered a few times. Comparisons are odious. Chapter 413, Deep in the Trench. Undersea treasures are very mysterious and difficult to search for. There are many well-known shipwrecks still missing. Wang Ya had read many legends about undersea treasures. In the early years, there was a rich man in the West who intentionally sank all his treasures in the sea. Later, the coordinates of the treasures were discovered, but no one had found them yet, which had become a mystery. Of course, the ocean itself is a mystery. There are many places that are unknown. For example, in the Bermuda Triangle, the world-famous Devil area, there are countless wrecked ships and planes buried, but no one knows why. There must be some special reasons for this strange place. However, Zhang Han hadn't been in the martial arts circle for a long time, and he didn't hear relevant anecdotes or take the initiative to learn about it because he was not very interested in it. Zhang Han, who had explored greater, more bizarre, and more dangerous places, now just wanted to let everything go as it was, just like the stone house on the seafloor, and he would get what he deserved in the end. After the yacht set out, it soon left the bay and began to head for the vast ocean. After viewing the seaside scenery, Zhang Han pondered and leaned over to Xian's ear and said softly, "How about I take you underwater?" "Oh?" Xian was stunned, and then her eyes lit up, nodding repeatedly like a chicken pecking rice. She replied happily, "Great." She looked at Meng Meng, who was lying alone on a reclining chair, and said, "Meng Meng, would you like to play with Grandaunt here for a while? Papa and Mama are going diving and will be back soon." "Huh?" Meng Meng quickly sat up and looked at Xian, while blinking her big eyes behind the little sunglasses. She quietly glanced at the soda and snacks on the other side. "Okay," Meng Meng answered. "Every time my mother is not around, I can eat a little more." Seeing this, Xian pursed her mouth, saying nothing, and went down with Zhang Han. The yacht had 3 floors in total, and they were now by the railings at the back of the second floor. Xian looked at the choppy sea and asked, "Do we need to put on swimsuits?" Hearing this, Zhang Han thought for a while and looked Xian's figure up and down, feeling a little hot. Though Zhang Han wanted Xian to change into a swimsuit, he was worried that he couldn't control himself during this period. By the time they finished, the ship would have arrived at the destination. After thinking about it, Zhang Han shook his head and said, "It's not necessary." Then he put his right hand around Xian's slender waist, pinched her gently, and jumped into the sea with her. Wow! Xian let out a light cry. In the next moment, she felt that she had fallen into the cool water. Huh? Xian blinked and looked left and right. Xian didn't expect that she could breathe underwater. Looking at her palm, she found that there seemed to be a film of water clinging to her skin, very thin, and she could even feel the temperature of the seawater. What a wonder! Xian looked at Zhang Han, and then her eyes were attracted by the scenery on the seafloor. The sunlight cast on the quiet seafloor seemed to be split into colorful light by a prism, which was very beautiful. Even the rocks, plants, shells, and corals on the seafloor seemed to be stained with colorful sunlight, which was so surprising. The seafloor of this shallow sea area was like a colorful world, with creatures bathing in the bright and warm water and wonderful fishes roaming in the coral. There was even a sea forest in front of them with woody plants. It was as beautiful as a dream. Xian was soon attracted to it. This is a fairyland. Let's go. Zhang Han turned sideways, held Xian in his arms from behind, encircled her waist with his hands, and then slowly swam forward with her. When passing by the coral, the two would get close to have a look. Occasionally, they could encounter groups of fishes, as well as a variety of slightly larger marine organisms. Xian had a very good time, and it was like riding a special submarine sightseeing cable car when she was held by Zhang Han. What beautiful coral! It's wonderful. Look over there, there is a group of small fish. There's a big fish over there. What's that? Look at that big turtle, it's swimming very fast. Xian kept chattering happily in Zhang Han's ear. Zhang Han listened patiently and kept smiling. Gradually, they left the shallow water and saw the bottom of the sea extending down at a large angle. Zhang Han, with Xian, dived down to about 400 meters, where the sunshine was a little dim. Compared with the mystery of the deep sea area, Xian preferred the beautiful scenery of the shallow sea area just now. After thinking about it, Xian planned to go back. At this time, she twisted her waist, turned around, and clasped her hands and feet round Zhang Han's body. Zhang Han could feel the softness of her body. Xian's eyes twinkled as she gave Zhang Han a kiss. So they exchanged a 5-minute kiss on the seafloor hundreds of meters deep. This experience could only be felt but not described. When their lips were parted, Xian's eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist. She stared at Zhang Han in a daze, which was a silent temptation for Zhang Han and made him feel hot again. Shall we, at the bottom of the sea, do something happy? Zhang Han's will began to collapse. However, the next moment, he found that Xian suddenly opened her eyes. Ah, shark! She exclaimed, let's go. Zhang Han was a little surprised and looked around. Not far in front of them, 7 fierce-looking sharks were rushing at them. The head shark, the largest in size, should be the leader. All those scars on its body showed that it had fought many times. If Zhang Han were an ordinary person, he would be afraid now. However, it's them who should escape. Zhang Han almost burst out laughing. Oh! Xian realized that she had made a mistake, so she began to chuckle. Yes, it is them who should escape. So in her eyes, the sharks were getting closer to them. When the distance was reduced to about 30 meters, Zhang Han waved his hand slightly. Bang! The head of the biggest shark suddenly tilted sideways, as if it had been punched. ? The shark shook its head. Who slapped me? Looking around with its small eyes, the shark found Zhang Han and began to stare at them. What's wrong with the two of them? At that moment, bang! The head of the leading shark tilted to the side again. ? Hiss! The man is beating me. Oh, it's dangerous here, brothers, let's go. Whoosh! The sharks turned around one by one and swam away quickly. Ha ha! Xian could not help laughing when she saw this. Now she thought the sharks were so cute. As a matter of fact, when the power gap was larger to a certain extent, many terrible things in the eyes of ordinary people would become lovely in the eyes of the strong. "Let's go back," said Xian. "Okay." Zhang Han nodded and swam up with Xian in his arms. It was like driving a car, but it was the sea rather than the breeze that blew across their cheeks, causing more resistance. In the cool and refreshing atmosphere, the two quickly emerged from the sea, while 10 meters ahead of them was the yacht. They went to the stern of the yacht and jumped up on it with a light leap. "None of our clothes are wet." Xian looked left and right, and touched her clothes. "It's so strange." Because of this, Zhang Han took out the water spirit stone and shook it in front of Xian. "Is it also a treasure?" Xian asked curiously. "It's a water spirit stone, a first-stage spirit treasure that enables people to stay in the water for a longer time, and also one of the building materials of the underwater residence, though treasures are classified into Huang grade, profound grade, earth grade, heaven grade, holy grade, and divine grade here. They are called spirit treasures in the orthodox cultivation world and are divided into the first stage to the 9th stage. For example, the tree on our mountain is a 5th stage spirit treasure, Zhang Han explained. There was a lot of common sense in the cultivation world, and Zhang Han planned to introduce some of it to Xian whenever he got the chance, so that she could gradually accumulate knowledge and experience. "I see." Xian nodded her forehead lightly, then took Zhang Han's arm and pressed her body against Zhang Han, saying proudly, "My husband is an immortal, and I gave birth to a baby for him." Ha ha ha. Zhang Han chuckled a few times and walked up with Xian's waist in his arms. They went back to the top deck. Zhang Li, Zif, Zhao Feng, and Wang Ming were chatting. Meng Meng was sitting in a chair next to Rong Jiaxin, eating a bag of shrimp chips. Ahem. When Xian and Zhang Han got to the seat behind Meng Meng, Xian gave out a light cough. "Huh?" Meng Meng was stupefied and turned to look at Mama. Meng Meng blankly opened her big, clear eyes, and then hurriedly handed the bag with just a few shrimp chips left to Rong Jiaxin, muttering, "Grand Aunt, I can't eat it. Mama said I couldn't eat too many snacks. Don't give them to me." Ha ha ha. Looking at Meng Meng's lovely appearance, Rong Jiaxin, Wang Ya, and others couldn't help laughing. "Yan." Rong Jiaxin suddenly stood up, went to Xian's side, and sat down, saying, "Meng Meng will be 4 years old soon, right?" "Yes," replied Xian. "Then, should she go to kindergarten?" Now children usually start kindergarten when they are 3 years old. While you have a job, Han." Rong Jiaxin smiled. Her implication was that Zhang Han was too fond of Meng Meng. It's time for Meng Meng to experience the collective life, junior class, middle class, and high class of kindergarten, and then primary school, said Rong Jiaxin. "Huh? Kindergarten?" Meng Meng was stunned and blinked at Rong Jiaxin. She knew that they were discussing something concerning her. "You're right, I'll ask about it later and find a good kindergarten for Meng Meng." Xian nodded. "Go to kindergarten?" Zhang Han began imagining the future. When Meng Meng goes to kindergarten, and Xian is out to work, will I be the only one in the restaurant during the day? It doesn't matter, but what if Meng Meng is bullied by other children in kindergarten? What if she cries? What if she can't see Daddy when she wants to? Thinking that Meng Meng would cry at that time, Zhang Han decided to refuse the suggestion directly. "She won't go." Zhang Han shook his head. "It's of no use. I can teach what she wants to learn in school." "Well, I won't go. I want to be with Papa and Mama." Meng Meng also made comments. Rong Jiaxin felt a little helpless. Han, Meng Meng needs to adapt to the collective life. Eating, taking a nap, and playing games together are very helpful for the growth of children, especially girls. 3 years old is the golden age of kindergarten, which has been scientifically verified, Wang Ming added. Zhang Han looked at Wang Ming and asked, "Do you believe that, uncle?" This. Wang Ming forced a smile, for it was obvious that Zhang Han didn't want the little girl to go to kindergarten. After thinking about it, he said, when we were children, the reason why we went to kindergarten late and only studied for 1 year was that each family had many children of the same age, and we often played with children from other families, which was also a kind of collective life. But now, with the development of the city, it is impossible to contact too many children in the unit building. Do you notice that now Meng Meng only plays with the little fat girl occasionally? I also think it's time for Meng Meng to go to kindergarten. Meng Meng is so beautiful and lovely, and there must be many people who like her and won't bully her, Zhang Li said. So all the adults except for Zhao Feng took part in the debate. Meng Meng looked left and right, and was a bit confused. The debaters were divided into 2 teams, and one of them was headed by Zhang Han. No, it was the opposite team with Zhang Han as the only member. The other team looks like an alliance. Zhang Han was sometimes silent, and sometimes shook his head. No, she won't. No, it's useless. Finally, Xian made up her mind and stared at Zhang Han, saying, even if she doesn't go now, she will definitely go in the future. Do you want to never let her go to school? What if Meng Meng is lonely and doesn't know how to make friends? You remind me that I've helped Meng Meng form some habits through hard work, which were all disrupted by you. Hearing this, Zhang Han pondered and began to doubt his decision. Human beings are social animals, even in the cultivation world. The territory of some big families and various cities were all societies with generations of children living a collective life there. And childhood is really an important stage of shaping one's character. Doesn't she get along with Wang Yihan very well? Zhang Han asked hesitantly. Wang Yihan has a good character, but not all children are like her, replied Xian. Zhang Han fell into silence. Everyone turned their eyes to him. After about 10 seconds, he finally compromised. You are right, Zhang Han nodded, then I'll find some children. No, I'm going to open a kindergarten directly. If others know that I have a kindergarten, they will rush to fill in the application form like in my restaurant. ? All of the others were stunned in a moment. Well, Rong Jiaxin was amused by Zhang Han and didn't know what to say. Yes, Han's kindergarten is also a kindergarten. According to his attitude, he must be the head of the kindergarten, but I don't think it's reliable. No way, Xian said, at a loss as to whether to laugh or cry. In this way, they will treat Meng Meng differently, and she can't grow well in such an environment. Although children were naive, their parents would tell them to keep a good relationship with Meng Meng, and Meng Meng, growing up being flattered, will easily develop bad habits. Don't worry about it, let's talk about it later. Zhang Han shook his head. Meng Meng looked left and right and made concessions. I will go to kindergarten, but I must go with Papa. Zhang Han smilingly touched Meng Meng's little head and nodded. Okay, Papa will accompany you then. He can't run his own kindergarten, so he decides to buy one directly. Zhang Han's attitude made everyone speechless. Since when should whether or not one goes to kindergarten be discussed in this way? During the conversation, they saw from a distance that a cargo ship was on the distant sea, following the ups and downs of the rough sea. The power of the sea is beyond imagination, and even a cargo ship weighing as much as 10 tons might be overturned. A moment later, their yacht sailed to the side of the cargo ship. Xuyong and others were standing on the deck of the cargo ship, waving to them. Ready? Asked Zhao Feng loudly. Ready. Xuyong replied. Let's start. Zhao Feng made a gesture. Xuyong told the people on the yacht to move. 8 square iron frames were sunk into the water, and their thick chains continued to extend downward. Together? Zhang Han looked at Xian and asked with a smile. Okay, replied Xian. Well, Han, is it convenient? I want to go down and have a look. Wang Ming coughed softly. After giving it some thought, Zhang Han nodded and said, okay. The depth was about 1,700 meters, and it was easy for Zhang Han to take 2 people with him. Then I'll go too. Zhang Li said happily. I want to have a look. Me too. Zif and Wang Yi agreed. They were also interested in the sunken ship. Me too. Meng Meng stood up and said. Zhang Han was surprised and then shook his head. With the help of the water spirit stone, he could take 2 people with them. If the number of people continued increasing, the effect of water avoidance would be reduced a lot, and they would suffer from the water pressure. Although with Zhang Han's spiritual force, he could barely maintain many people's underwater activities, that would reduce the efficiency of treasure salvaging. Finally, Zhang Han took Xian and Wang Ming to dive all the way down, and they saw a huge blue whale on the way. As their depth increased, the light soon dimmed. The well-prepared Zhang Han turned on the major light. They soon got to the wreck. Is there a trench next to it? If the ship fell into the trench, we would not be able to get it. Wang Ming was surprised to see the deep trench. In such an environment, Xian looked left and right, feeling that the trench was very frightening. Zhang Han lit up the surroundings with his major light, and saw that the 8 iron baskets were not far from the wreck, so he took the 2 people into the wreck with him. They first went to the innermost stone house. At this time, the array of the stone house door had lost its function because of the loss of spiritual chi, and the room was also full of seawater. But the light was very good. What is this here? Night luminescent pearls? Xian looked at the pearls and exclaimed, yes. Zhang Han nodded, chuckled, and said, the quality is not bad. We can take them back to the mountain and use them as decoration. Is it a cultivator's abode? There are more than 100 night luminescent pearls, Wang Ming said with widely opened eyes. So Zhang Han took out the 2 big bags he had brought down and, with a wave of his hand, put all the night luminescent pearls inside. The 3 returned to the ship and began to move things from several treasure rooms. After 8 iron baskets were filled, Zhang Han and the 2 quickly floated to the sea surface and got on the ship. Bring them up, Zhang Han waved and said. Yes. Zhao Feng nodded and gave orders to Xuyong and others. So the chains began to rise. There were many treasures, and it required one more trip to transport them all. Taking advantage of this free time, Zif and Jiang Li went over to Xian and asked repeatedly, how is it? Is it fun down there? Is there any monster in the wreck, like a giant squid or something? No. Xian smiled and told them what she saw in the sea. Seeing that many treasures had been brought to the cargo ship, Zif asked quickly, Sister Yan, do you want to go down again? No. Xian shook her head. Then I'll go, brother-in-law, take me. Brother, I'll go too. Cousin. Zhang Han thought about it and finally took the 3 of them with him. When the 3 girls were looking at the shipwreck in surprise, Zhang Han put the rest of the treasure into 8 iron baskets. When they were about to go up, kaboom! All of a sudden, the sunken ship vibrated, as if it had risen a little, and then it fell into the side ditch. Zhang Han cast a light to the other side, only to see the ship slowly descending and finally disappearing from his field of vision. He watched for about 2 more minutes. Suddenly, deep in the trench, a somewhat invisible light flashed. What's there? Zhang Han's eyes narrowed. Chapter 414, Returning Fully Loaded. There was no doubt that the trench was deep, and no one knew what was on the bottom of the sea. But Zhang Han did notice that flash of light. The intuition he had developed over the years made him feel that there had to be something precious there. The last time he looked down at the edge of the trench, he got a sense of oppression. Now, as a cultivator in the early perfect building base stage, he didn't have a sense of that kind of oppression and was confident to go on exploring. But the 3 girls were still here, and Zhang Han couldn't let them take the risk. After thinking about it, he chose to go back to the ship first. As soon as they returned to the yacht, Jiang Li cried out excitedly, "Ah, it's so cool, the sunken ship is so big. We just took the treasures out and it suddenly fell into the trench, as if it was swallowed by the darkness. It's really scary yet so cool." Meng Meng burst her lips and said, "HMPH, I don't like Papa anymore. You didn't take Meng Meng there. Ha ha ha." Zhang Han shook his head with a smile while rubbing Meng Meng's little head. I'll play with you later. It's dark below, and there's nothing beautiful down there. Daddy will take you to a nice place then. Well, let's drag the hook and you should keep your promise. Okay. Zhang Han held out his little finger. Drag the hook and... Aunt Lili, what's next? Oh, I see. Drag the hook and hang them up to keep to the promise for 100 years. This sentence was taught by Zhang Li. Meng didn't know what it meant, so she would ask whenever she forgot. Zhang Li was confused as well. Drag the hook and hang them up to keep to the promise for 100 years was a nursery rhyme passed down from generation to generation, and she didn't know why it meant to keep a promise. So she searched the internet for this sentence and realized it was an illusion. Drag hook derived from the sentence the hook is curved and can be used to hang things, while hang them up didn't mean to kill them because them referred to ancient copper coins. Therefore, the whole sentence described the process of stringing copper coins, which implied that the promises made would never be changed. Zhang Li felt a little guilty because she always believed that hang them up meant to kill them. Zhao Feng was now on the yacht, waving to let the cargo ship beside him hoist up the chain. At the same time, the first salvaged treasures, together with the original broken treasure box, were put into containers with layers of protection. Some treasure boxes were highly damaged, and Zhang Han could see a whole box of ancient gold coins inside, but he didn't know their specific years. Some boxes were filled with porcelain. Although the workers carrying the boxes were very careful, they could still hear that many of the porcelain inside were broken. Some of the bronzes were also corroded by the seawater, and only the jewelry was in good condition. There were many treasures in the first batch, whose value was amazing. Wait for me here and I'll go down again. I'll be back in 10 minutes to an hour. Zhang Han checked the time and said. What are you going to do? Xian asked. I found something. Zhang Han replied with a smile. Then, please take care. If it's dangerous, don't go down. Xian was worried. Just at the bottom of the sea, there was a dark area around, and nothing could be seen. If she was left alone, she would feel panicked. Don't worry, I'm just going down to have a look. Zhang Han smiled. Huh? Meng, who was next to Xian, observed them for a while and found something unusual. She said in an anxious tone, Oh, it's dangerous, Papa, please don't go down. Ha ha ha. Zhang Han couldn't help laughing, he was so happy to be cared about by his daughter. While touching Meng's little head, Zhang Han said, It's not dangerous, Daddy will go to check something out and be back soon. Meng, you should behave well here. After chatting for a few minutes, Zhang Han went to the side of the ship and jumped into the sea. This time, Zhang Han, who didn't have a load, was swimming fast and diving deep like a real fish. He soon reached the position where the shipwreck was, and the stone house had disappeared. Without stopping, Zhang Han kept swimming into the trench, aiming at the place where the light had just shined from. At the same time, Zhang Han's soul sense was spread outside his body, which could have covered 50 meters under normal circumstances and 30 meters in the deep sea. The same thing happened to his spiritual force, which could cover 50 meters and maintain its peak attack or defense capability within 30 meters. But the farther away he got, the lower Zhang Han's control of his spiritual force was and the weaker it would be. Zhang Han had confidence in himself because of his soul sense, and he would retreat as soon as possible if there was any crisis. To be honest, he also knew that his performance after becoming a father was quite different from that in the cultivation world. In the cultivation world, there were some extremely dangerous places that he could enter regardless of his own safety, because the more dangerous it was, the more opportunities there would be. In addition to his skill, Zhang Han relied on his spirit of not being afraid of death. But now, he was afraid of death. Zhang Han was no longer alone. He had Xian, Meng, Zhang Li, and his parents, so he had to be careful. Zhang Han used to be cautious, but now he was even more cautious. So when he reached a certain depth, Zhang Han slowed down. He felt close to the bottom of the trench. Zoom. All of a sudden, his soul sense touched something and began rippling below him. The surprising light flashed in Zhang Han's eyes, and then he suddenly froze. Spiritual farmland on the seafloor. Zhang Han couldn't hide his delight anymore. He was a little surprised because the spiritual qi in that spiritual farmland was rich, which meant that a certain amount of spirit treasures, such as spiritual herbs, were still growing there. So Zhang Han moved down and illuminated the area with the main light. He saw that there was a small underwater hill below, about 1/10 the size of Mount New Moon, sky-covering array. That cultivator who set this array and owned the spiritual farmland must be at the stage of innateness or above. Zhang Han shook his head slightly. The farmland was just below that stone house, so it should also belong to the house owner. Zhang Han tried to light up the whole area, but he couldn't find the border of the darkness. The trench seemed to be funnel-shaped. While its entrance was about 100 meters wide, the middle was about 30 meters wide, and the bottom was much wider. It was dark all around, without any light. Apart from up and down, Zhang Han had no other sense of direction. It was like the other world. But for Zhang Han, this scene was not uncommon. The array is not bad, it should be difficult for someone else to break it. Zhang Han smiled faintly, stretched out his palm forward, and let his spiritual force rush out. Suddenly, a gap appeared in front of him, emitting a soft light as if there was a Xanadu in it. Zhang Han flashed into the gap without hesitation. When Zhang Han landed, he found that there was a hill surrounded by plants, and the seawater was blocked by a transparent bowl-shaped cover with a radius of about 30 meters. On this hill, there was a tree every few meters, and the total number was in the thousands. At the top of each tree was a night-luminescent pearl, which gathered into a sea of lights. Not bad. Zhang Han's eyes narrowed slightly as he found that there are many spiritual herbs on the hill. Most of them were first-stage spirit treasures, 20% were second-stage spirit treasures, and 9 of them were third-stage spirit treasures. Although these spiritual herbs were not of great use to Zhang Han, they were top-level resources and a huge fortune for those in the security group. In particular, the elixirs made from the 9 third-stage spirit treasures could be given to Dai and Little Hai, or to Ziyan, Zhaofeng, and Zhang Han's aunt. As for the remaining large amount of resources, they were enough to enhance the strength of the security team. Huh? All of a sudden, Zhang Han's eyes were fixed on the stone tablet on top of the hill. A few words were engraved on the stone tablet, controlling the clouds and rain. Is there such a thing here? Zhang Han smiled faintly, his eyes twinkled, and his feet stomped on the mountain. Come out. His spiritual force rushed at the stone tablet and hit it hard. All of a sudden, ow! Zhang Han suddenly heard a voice, and there seemed to be ripples shining in the stone tablet. After checking it with his soul sense, Zhang Han found it was a flood dragon's soul. The flood dragon, also known as Zhao, a water beast, belonged to the dragon family. It had scales and the ability to overturn rivers and seas. An adult flood dragon should be at least above the level of innateness. It was a pity that the dragon in front of him was just an unconscious soul specially arranged to guard here. Even so, the flood dragon soul had the strength of the Grand Master early stage. Obviously, it must have been at the level of innateness before its death. It seems that I underestimated the owner of the stone house. He should be at least a middle-stage innateness master. I wonder what cultivating method could kill such a master. Ow! While Zhang Han was thinking, the flood dragon soul suddenly moved and rushed at him. Zhang Han's eyes flashed green fluorescence as he transformed his spiritual force into a 10-meter-high giant palm and swatted the flood dragon soul. Slam! The flood dragon soul was reeling and lost 30% of its energy. According to Zhang Han's experience, another 2 slaps along with a soul sense attack would destroy it. Just when Zhang Han was about to slap it a second time, he suddenly froze. Why not keep the flood dragon soul? I can integrate it into the card weapon. As Zhang Han activated his soul sense, a black card in his jacket flew out and hovered in front of the flood dragon. Then Zhang Han raised his right hand, 99 night-luminescent pearls, dotted on nearby trees, rose into the air. Zhang Han's eyes were shining and his right hand was clenched. King Ming steel. At the moment he clenched his fist, Zhang Han's spiritual force mixed with a little soul sense rushed out. The 99 night-luminescent pearls burst into pieces, and under the control of Zhang Han's energy, suddenly formed an imprint made up of complex Chinese characters with cyan light over the dragon soul. The imprint instantly smacked the dragon soul, making it smaller and smaller, and finally absorbed into the black card. The moment the dragon soul was fully absorbed, a dragon-shaped pattern appeared on the card. The pattern constantly swam and struggled, trying to break the prison and escape, but each time it was suppressed by a cyan light that suddenly appeared. King Ming's steel was a method specially used to suppress the soul, provided that the strength of the executor was much higher than that of the oppressed, or the soul was very weak. Clearly, Zhang Han at this time could easily suppress the flood dragon soul. It's time to harvest. Zhang Han looked at the patches of spiritual herbs on the mountain. His palm moved as he began to harvest them directly. With the method of the farmers, Zhang Han controlled some first-stage spiritual herbs with a height of more than 1 meter to tie up other high-stage spiritual herbs pulled out by their roots, and then tied up the bundles of spiritual herbs into a string. In this way, in about 40 minutes, all the herbs planted in this small field were harvested. Of course, Zhang Han wouldn't neglect those night pearls. He directly rolled some large leaf herbs of ordinary quality into a cylinder, each of which was filled with more than 20 night-luminescent pearls, and then strung these cylinders with long herbs. After all this was done, Zhang Han grabbed one end of the long rope-like spirit grass, jumped into the sea, and swam quickly. If someone else could see this scene, they would be stunned. It's so funny to see a man swimming in the deep sea with something as long as 100 meters, like a whip. For Zhang Han, the spiritual farmland was really a surprise. Just as Zhang Han swam up 100 meters, zoom, 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 all of a sudden, a deep, heavy noise came from his right. The noise was particularly loud and clear in this dark world. It sounded like metal rubbing together. What sound could be heard in this place? Of course it was mysterious and weird. What's that? Zhang Han looked in the direction of the sound. Zhang Han adjusted the sensitivity of his soul sense to the maximum, and began to scan 30 meters ahead. All of a sudden, a huge shadow rushed into Zhang Han's soul sense scanning area. Zhang Han flinched to the side. A ship. Zhang Han frowned and turned on the flashlight. He saw a huge, mountain-like ship moving sideways in front of him. The ship was as large as a mountain, but it was very dilapidated and even had many holes in it. The ship was dead and empty. The whole ship was sending out extremely freezing chi like an iceberg. An unmanned ship? No, not that kind. Zhang Han had a feeling. He was being watched by many things. There were a lot of sight lines coming from the ship. There was not nothing on the ship, there was something, and even a lot of things. Zhang Han's eyes were shining. His eyes moved with the ship, and he saw dim figures looming and disappearing on it. Obviously, those lines of sight came from them. It seemed that they wanted to tell Zhang Han something. Or they just wanted Zhang Han to go aboard the ship. After a long time, the ship went sideways in front of Zhang Han and gradually disappeared in the dark. Boat of curse? Zhang Han raised his eyebrows slightly. It was extremely dangerous to get on such a ship, but it was possible to get something on board. If it was Zhang Han before his rebirth, he might have gone to explore the ship, but now he decided to let it go. Zhang Han shook his head slightly and continued to swim up. As a cultivator at the early stage of the building base, Zhang Han realized it was too risky for him to explore the ship recklessly, and he was not sure that he could guarantee his safety. Furthermore, a ship that could be cursed like this might not have anything valuable on it. Meanwhile, on the yacht, Xian, who kept checking her watch every 2 minutes, was chatting with the others absently, and the atmosphere was much more serious than before. It's been more than 40 minutes. Why hasn't he come up yet? Xian bit her lips anxiously. Just then, Zhang Han's voice came from the entrance of the deck. Well, I am back. Swish, swish, swish. Everyone looked over and fixed their eyes on Zhang Han. Papa is back. Meng cheered. Everyone else was also relieved, but they soon froze again. Zhang Han was holding an herb rope with the other end extending into the sea. When he got on the deck, bundles of plants were pulled out from the sea behind him. What's that? The crowd went up to him curiously. It's so long. It was a bit of surprise to see this bunch of plants start to extend to the next deck after circling the top deck. Are these what he went down for? Hiss, hiss, hiss. Wang Ming took a few deep breaths, picked up a small pink leaf, and looked at it carefully. His face soon changed and a few words came out of his mouth. Natural precious materials. Han, are all these natural precious materials? Wang Ming's eyes widened. Yes. Zhang Han nodded while continuing to pull up the bundles of herbs. Soon after, Wang Ming's exclamation was all that was left in his ear. A lot of herbs. It must be a great trip with so many natural precious materials. Not over yet, that's enough. You're not done yet? Still not over? My gosh, so many herbs. This, so many. Anything else? It's over, there are so many of them. Wang Ming stood beside Zhang Han and jumped up and down. At first, he just exclaimed in a low voice, but at last, he shouted directly, it's the first time in my life that I have seen so many natural precious materials. Oh, there's no room on this deck. Wang Ya grinned in surprise. My master is amazing. Zhao Feng felt himself stiffen. The quantity here was more than 5 times that of Instructor Liu from last time, but Zhang Han just tied them up in bundles at will. It's really my master's style. Xian was also a bit dazed, for she hadn't expected Zhang Han to take so many things back. Papa. Meng, who had been looking left and right, suddenly pointed to one side and said, there seems to be a ball in it. There are balls in it. Do you want to play? Zhang Han clapped his hands and went to hug Meng. Yes. Meng's eyes lit up. Let's open one of them. Zhang Han went over there with Meng in his arms, opened the cylinder containing the night-luminescent pearls, and poured out 26 of the pearls. Wow, it's beautiful. What is it? Zhang Li went over to pick up one and asked curiously, it's so round, isn't it a night-luminescent pearl? Yes. Zhang Han nodded. Night-luminescent pearls of such high quality? Wang Ya picked up one and exclaimed, it's so beautiful. So they all took one and looked at it carefully. Zhao Feng didn't follow them. Under his arrangement, the cargo ship and yacht began to return, and Ling's was informed. Ling's would arrange someone to pick up the goods at the port. Hearing that there were about 30 tons of jewelry, Ling's was shocked and told her father. Therefore, Chairman Lin arranged someone to come along with her. When the yacht was heading back, Meng blinked and asked, Papa, what is a night-luminescent pearl? It's a kind of gem. It can shine, Zhang Han explained. It wasn't shining. Meng was confused. In this way, you can see it shining. Zhang Han chuckled, put the pearl in his coat, let Meng put her head in, and immediately heard Meng's cry of surprise. Wow, it's shining, Papa, it's shining, it's so interesting. After playing with Meng for a while, everyone sat back in their reclining chairs. The deck was almost full of spiritual herbs, and there was no place for activities. When Meng was playing with Xian and Rong Jiexin, Wang Ming found an opportunity to approach Zhang Han and ask, Han, what's the level of these natural precious materials? Most of them are at the level of profound grade, less than 20% are earth grade and 9 are heaven grade, replied Zhang Han. Really? Wang Ming was stunned. He kept shaking at the corners of his mouth, then looked at Zhang Han in a daze and murmured, so, Han, you just went down and brought back so many natural precious materials? Hiss, why are you so lucky? Wang Ming was completely confused. Have I been living in a fake martial arts world before? What have I experienced in this period of time? Natural precious materials? How come they are not precious? No, they are not precious in Han's eyes at all. Divine objects, holy objects and heaven-grade, earth-grade, and profound-grade treasures, Han is lacking none of them. Are they still treasures? Ha ha. Chapter 415, Value. When Wang Ming was about to be lost in various fancies and conjectures, he was suddenly stunned again. Han, you know how to make elixirs, can all these natural precious materials become elixirs? Hiss. Before Zhang Han could answer, Wang Ming felt his teeth get cold. He looked at the sea with dull eyes and murmured, "This is an industrial chain and assembly line. It's too extreme." Wang Ming was now listless. He heard that when someone else got a natural precious material, they would sell it directly for a good price or spend a huge amount of money and ask the alchemists of the heavenly elixir sect to make elixirs with it. Moreover, the success rate of alchemy was not 100%. According to the agreement, if the alchemist failed, the natural precious materials would be wasted and money would not be refunded. This kind of tension and excitement that could only be felt in stone gambling had to be understood through personal experience. But Han doesn't need to think about how to sell these materials at all. He can use them to make elixirs. He said his elixir-making skill was better than array skill. Wang Ming looked at Zhang Han with some uncertainty. Han defeated Xiankishan, the sect chief of the mystical fog sect, with his array skill. He said his elixir-making skill was better than his array skill. Wang Ming felt his worldview was breaking. Comparisons are odious. At this time, Meng suddenly began to sing happily, "Let it go, let it go, can't hold it back anymore." Grand Aunt, have you heard of Frozen? No, what is it? Rong Jiaxin asked with a smile. In Chinese, it is called Wonderful Stories with Ice and Snow, the story with magic snow, ice and snow adventure, Snow Queen, Ice Queen or Queen of Ice and Snow. Haven't you heard of all these names? Meng asked curiously. I haven't heard of that. Is it a movie? Replied Rong Jiaxin. Yes, I like Princess Elsa. She can use magic to make snow. Grand Aunt, Meng will take you to the cinema later, said Meng seriously. Oh, it's nice of Meng to take Grand Aunt to the cinema, Rong Jiaxin said with a smile, and her love for Meng could be seen from her expression and eyes. At this time, Zhang Han pondered then waved to Zhao Feng. Feng, build a cinema in the company. Although he could make a block booking, Meng couldn't do as she liked in a commercial cinema. Zhang Han thought it would be better to build a cinema himself and let Meng watch whatever she wanted. At the same time, Zhang Han was also wondering if he should build an amusement park for Meng when Mount New Moon was rebuilt the second time. It's a good idea. In Meng's amusement park, of course, there should be not only those common amusement items. My daughter should have a better time there. Magic World? There are many arrays that can be used, but they require a lot of crystal stones. Fortunately, there is a prototype of the crystal mineral at the bottom of the mountain, and the crystals produced in the future can be used, so this idea is worth planning. If a large-scale amusement park is to be built, the area of Mount New Moon will not be big enough. During the second reconstruction, the two mountains in the east and north should be included in the construction scope. Therefore, Zhang Han made such a happy decision. The others, upon hearing Zhang Han's words, had different expressions. Meng said she would take Grand Aunt to the cinema. So you decide to build a cinema? Almighty money. After hearing this, everyone began to worry when they saw Zhang Han thinking seriously. Is he trying to make a major move? Ziyan pursed her mouth, smiled helplessly, and secretly rolled her eyes to Zhang Han. You only know how to spoil Meng. Zhang Han returned a look of, I'm also spoiling you. Ziyan slightly raised her lips, mischievously indicating that she did not feel Zhang Han's doting. Zhang Han's eyes twinkled, indicating, I'll give you a good feeling when we go back at night. Xian's pretty face turned red as she was defeated. No one else noticed the flirting in the couple's eyes. Instead, they were busy exclaiming and chatting with each other. Okay. Zhao Feng nodded, took out his mobile phone and made a phone call to arrange it. Papa, are you going to build a cinema for Meng Meng? Meng Meng looked at Zhang Han a few times and asked happily. Well, yes, Zhang Han replied with a chuckle. Is it a cinema specially built for Meng Meng? Meng Meng's big eyes brightened. It's specially built for Meng Meng. Zhang Han nodded. Great, Papa is the best, Daddy, hug me. Meng Meng extended her little arms to Zhang Han. Zhang Han got up and walked over, holding Meng Meng in his arms. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Meng Meng kissed Zhang Han on his cheeks several times. How does one feel to be kissed by their daughter? Zhang Han felt great. Well, I'm going to have my own cinema. Meng Meng cheered in Zhang Han's arms, feeling so happy. The adults couldn't help laughing. The weather was clear and the waves were not high. But after driving for more than an hour, the waves began to surge up to 10 meters. Xian was a little excited. She looked at the sea and said, "It's better to go surfing right now." At this time, she was not afraid of the sea, even the biggest waves. Since her husband could take her to the bottom of the sea, the waves were nothing. Try it out if you want. Zhang Han chuckled. Then I'll go down and ask if there's a surfboard, Zhao Feng said, and walked quickly to the bottom of the ship. After a while, he came up with 2 surfboards. There are 2 surfboards, Zhao Feng said. Then let's go down and have some fun. Zhang Han looked at Xian with a smile. Okay. I'm going, too, I'm going, too. Meng Meng shouted in Zhang Han's arms. Xian hesitated and looked at Zhang Han. Come with us, Zhang Han said with a smile. Is that okay? Xian hesitated. Before Zhang Han answered, Meng Meng said, Yes, yes, Papa is the most powerful, Papa will take us to play. Ha ha ha. Zhang Han smiled. Holding Meng Meng in his left hand and Xian's hand in his right, Zhang Han thought for a moment. Instead of going straight to the sea, he went to the bottom deck. Zhao Feng followed them with the surfboards. After arriving at the destination, Zhang Han looked at Zhao Feng and said, Throw them down. Okay. Zhao Feng directly threw a surfboard down. The surfboard could have fallen directly into the water below, but at last, it floated forward a dozen meters. During this period, Zhang Han leapt to catch up with the surfboard and hooked his feet to the rope of the surfboard. Oh no! Meng Meng in Zhang Han's arms was startled and shouted loudly. But then, the little girl found that it was like riding a motorcycle on the sea in Papa's arms, which was so interesting. After thinking about it, Zhang Han asked Xian to hold Meng Meng, and then held Xian horizontally in his arms. At the same time, Zhang Han's hand went through Xian's armpit and held one of Meng Meng's small arms tightly. Then on the waves, there was the laughter of adults and children. Ah, brother, sharks! Suddenly, Zhang Li's shout came from the yacht. Sharks! Xian looked around curiously, and finally saw several shark dorsal fins on the right side more than 20 meters away. Sharks? Xian warned Zhang Han. Huh? Sharks, Papa, hurry up, here come the sharks. Meng Meng was frightened and waved to urge Zhang Han. Well, don't worry, they're just passing by. Zhang Han shook his head slightly and continued to control the surfboard. These sharks were the ones he had encountered before. And the leading one was the shark with several scars. When they arrived, Zhang Han noticed that they wanted to get closer at first, but after seeing Zhang Han clearly, they suddenly braked. Damn it, it's that hateful human. Fight in the sea? Brothers, let them see the power of the overlord of the sea. The leading shark shook his head coolly, and suddenly several sharks moved. They began marching in an orderly way 20 meters away from Zhang Han's side. Swish! The leading shark broke through the water, and its whole body jumped out of the sea. Then it went down, raising a huge spray. Then there was the second, the third. They were like jumping dolphins. Well, What are they doing? Meng Meng blinked her big eyes and looked curiously at the side. Read more chapter on vipnovel.com. They are playing, Xian answered as she looked at the side. In addition to the two of them, Zhang Li and others on the boat were also stunned. Are these sharks performing? In their eyes, the sharks jumped twice. The third time, they leapt out of the sea together, and their huge tails hit the water vigorously in the direction of Zhang Han. The seawater was lifted up and poured down on Zhang Han. Retreat. Whoosh. The sharks swam away quickly under the command of the leading one. Zhang Han couldn't help laughing. When the crisis came, the light in his eyes flashed, and the seawater changed its trajectory, falling into the sea 5 meters ahead of them, without any impact on them. Well, bad sharks? Meng Meng chuckled. In Zhang Han's arms, Xian slightly raised her head, kissed Zhang Han on the cheek, and then said, "Let's go up." Okay. Zhang Han nodded and swam to the yacht. Back on the yacht, they saw other people sitting in reclining chairs, the sea wind blowing on them, drinking cold drinks, very leisurely. Wang Ming sighed sincerely. I haven't enjoyed such a leisurely life for a long time. About 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they arrived at the southern district port. By this time, Lin Xuan, her father, had finished sorting out and registering the goods. Because of playing all the way, Zhang Han and the others arrived an hour later than the cargo ship. After getting off the ship, Zhao Feng arranged for a truck and called Dahu and others to transport all the resources on the yacht to Mount New Moon. Zhang Han and the others also disembarked in the port because the yacht would sail back to the Deepwater Bay Club. Boss. At this time, Xuyong, his eyes shining green, ran to them. We have counted 30 tons of jewelry, 1 ton of ancient gold coins and a large number of silver coins. This is the list, and they are worth 2.2 billion yuan in total. Chairman Lin intends to buy them all. He can pay 1.5 billion yuan first, and the balance will be paid in half a month. There are also a number of antiques, but 90% of them are incomplete and worthless. Only a few of them can be auctioned, Xuyong said without pause. Then leave it to them. Zhang Han waved his hand and didn't even bother to look at the list. Shall we discuss the price with them again? Xuyong thought for a moment and said, I think the price can be raised a little. That will do. Zhang Han shook his head slightly, for the price was in line with his expectation. Although he would surely make more money after negotiating, it was not necessary to bargain for such a small amount of money. The 2.2 billion in addition to the previous deposits and the money from the antique auction was about 3 billion yuan, not a small amount. Zhang Han would not have to worry about money in the future. In the face of these figures, all he had to do was spend money. It was no exaggeration that as long as he made those spiritual herbs into medicinal pellets and sold them, he could earn another 10 billion yuan. Money was important, of course. But when the martial artists advanced to a certain level, their demand for treasures would exceed that for money. No one would exchange their treasures for waste paper, which was the same in the cultivation world. A crystal stone was equivalent to cash for a lower stage cultivator, but for higher stage cultivators, crystal stones were useless and they began to barter. Let's go back and make dinner. Zhang Han held Meng Meng and walked to the front group. Let's have dinner. Meng Meng cheered. What do you want to eat tonight? Zhang Han asked Meng Meng. Well, I want to eat roast pig's feet, roast duck, and that. Meng Meng forgot the name of the dish and began to think about it. Okra. Zhang Han smiled and reminded her. Yes, okra, Mama likes it very much. Meng Meng also likes it very much. Zhang Han laughed and took the lead in the extended Rolls-Royce Phantom. Rong Jiexin, who was following them, smiled. She could feel that only Meng Meng was Zhang Han's favorite. Generally speaking, now that I'm here, don't you ask what your aunt wants to eat first? But Zhang Han asked Xian and Meng Meng first as usual. She had the same feeling when Xian first met Zhang Han. They got in the car and drove all the way back to New Moon Bay. At 5:30 p.m., they arrived at the restaurant. and there were already many people in line. There were more and more well-dressed people. "Hello, Mr. Zhang." When they saw Zhang Han, they stood up immediately and greeted him respectfully. The old customers also stood up and shouted, "Hello, boss." When they entered the restaurant, most of the members had been seated. Wang Juin's family and Wang Jiaxuan's family were sitting at Wang Qing's table. On the table were 2 gift boxes, which contained 4 bottles of red wine and a box of tea. These were all gifts specially prepared by Wang Jiaxuan. Since Zhang Han solved their problems last time, she had been waiting for Zhang Han to come back to accept her thanks. When they came to the restaurant again today, they all felt it was very strange here. Who are the people in the line? Why are so many bosses here with higher social status than us? Wang Juin told them, "Don't be so surprised, this scene is repeated every day, Mr. Zhang." Seeing Zhang Han coming in, Wang Jiaxuan took the lead to welcome him and greeted him with a warm smile. "Meng Meng, Meng Meng." Wang Yihan ignored the others and went straight to Meng Meng. Following Wang Yihan, Wu Guang said shyly, "Meng Meng, I missed you so much." "Tut tut." Wang Jiaxuan glanced at Wu Guang and forced a smile. She knew that Mr. Zhang liked Meng Meng best, and Wang Juin had told her many times. "Hello." Zhang Han smiled, then looked at Xian and said, "Go upstairs, I'm going to start cooking, we'll have dinner at about 6:30 p.m. While talking, Zhang Han put Meng Meng in his arms on the ground, and the 3 little guys got together and began chatting. "Let's go up and talk." Xian smiled and headed to the 2nd floor. Zhang Han went to the kitchen. Zhao Feng had already prepared the ingredients in advance, including more than 20 steaks, 5 pig's feet, a plate of chicken wings, as well as okra, cucumber, etc. When Zhang Han was about to cook, Liang Hao got up and went over to him. "Well, boss, he whispered, "He Chen, master, he intends to visit you tomorrow. He just wants to make friends and talk with you, and he will come with a few wealthy Singaporeans from big families. He is wondering if it is convenient for you tomorrow." "It's not convenient," refused Zhang Han. Zhang Han was going to start making elixirs tomorrow. Since those spiritual herbs were uprooted, they could only be kept in the best condition for 2 days, otherwise, the curative effect of elixirs would be reduced a lot. Furthermore, there were so many herbs, even Zhang Han needed some time to deal with them. "Well, yes, I'll tell him later." Liang Hao's mouth quivered slightly as he went back with a forced smile. "Wait." Zhang Han suddenly raised his head and said, "Have them contact Zhao Feng, I can meet them tomorrow morning." "Really?" Liang Hao was overjoyed and nodded, Okay, I'll tell him immediately." Chapter 416, Complete Change. After Liang Hao finished, he happily ran back to his seat and took out his mobile phone to inform He Chen. If Liang Hao failed, he would notify He Chen after he got back at night. But if he succeeded, he would notify him immediately. He Chen, after all, was a famous and powerful man in Singapore. Even Liang Hao, when not being accompanied by his elders, was not qualified to meet and talk with He Chen. Now, for Zhang Han's sake, He Chen even asked Liang Hao to help, which he hadn't expected before. If he succeeded, He Chen's attitude toward him will be different from before. Now, of course, he was overjoyed and dialed He Chen's number directly. "Elder He, my boss agreed. I'll make sure of the meeting time for you tomorrow." Seeing her brother's excitement, Liang Mengkai pouted. "How can you get so excited, you good for nothing?" "Ha ha," Liang Hao smiled and said, "How can I not be happy? After all, I have helped Elder He." "Why do you always think of Elder He? The most promising man is behind you. What about the man your sister used to like?" Liang Mengkai said, shaking her head. "He's not just amazing. If there's a family knew about it, they would celebrate for 3 days and 3 nights. Liang Hao shook his head slightly. "Didn't you say she had a bad relationship with her family?" asked Liang Mengkai in a low voice. "That's very normal. After all, Their family has existed for nearly 100 years and made many rules. But Zhang can ignore all the rules. Liang Hao shook his head. Yes, Sister Yan may have some difficulties, for she hasn't informed her family yet. Maybe she doesn't want them to know, or she's going to tell them at a special time. Liang Mengkai shook her head and sighed. I don't know when they will hold their wedding. Their life is already very romantic, and their wedding must be grand beyond imagination. How can you look forward to their wedding more than they do? Liang Hao shook his head with a smile and said, You're right, tomorrow, I will remind Elder He and others in advance. Otherwise, when these big men return to Singapore, they will definitely tell the Zi family about this. We're back. Yu Qingqing and Zhao Du came back with 4 cold drinks in their hands. It would be more comfortable to enjoy the dinner today with a cold drink. Zhang Han was also very serious when cooking. The area of Zhang Han's restaurant was limited, and there was no place to put the oven, so the process of making roast duck was arranged in the restaurant next door by Zhao Feng. Every time he borrowed the oven next door, Zhao Feng would leave a roast duck at the request of the manager, which made the manager overjoyed. Zhang Han was in charge of roast pig's feet and other dishes besides roast duck. Although it would take a lot of time for an ordinary chef to make so many dishes, Zhang Han's cooking speed was very fast, and all the procedures were carried out in an orderly manner. While waiting for the dishes, Zhang Han took out his mobile phone and dialed Tannen's number. Director Zhang. Tannen's words with a smile came from Zhang Han's mobile phone. Hearing this, Zhang Han shook his head and smiled. Manager Liz so well prepared that even the token has been sent to me. Since I'm a director, what about my treatment? Zhang Han asked. The treatment is detailed in the app, and you will get 100,000 extra points every year, and that's enough. I'll check it myself, that's all. Zhang Han hung up the phone directly. Then he clicked open the app of the Safety Force Center and saw that the score shown below was 113,482. Of the more than 100,000 points, more than 10,000 of them were obtained recently by Xuyong and Instructor Liu by arranging for their men to do tasks. There were 999 plus unread messages in My Friends. Zhang Han clicked on it and found that those were all friend requests. How many people want to be my friend? Zhang Han directly clicked to ignore the unread messages, and then transferred 50,000 points to Protector Leng. But Protector Leng didn't accept it. Zhang Han thought Protector Leng was not online and was about to put down his mobile phone. But Protector Leng sent a voice message to him. Director Zhang, come on, it's not a lot of points. After hearing this, Zhang Han directly typed back. It's natural and proper to pay off debts. You must accept it. Well, I'll take it. Protector Leng forced to smile. After the Battle of Strange Peak Island, he was puzzled for a long time. Unexpectedly, Protector Zhang, who had been received several times by himself, was a Grandmaster strong. At that time, under Zhang Han's control, the strange card flew directly out of He Qingshan's body. Every time Protector Leng recalled this scene, he couldn't help shivering. He hoped that Zhang Han would accept the 50,000 points and give him an excuse to ask Zhang Han for help in the future. There was not much chance of getting help from a big man. Unfortunately, Zhang Han was a man of principle. Since Zhang Han told him that it's natural and proper to repay debts, he knew that Zhang Han had his own bottom line and principles. I just took it for granted. Protector Leng shook his head helplessly. On the other side, Zhang Han exchanged the remaining points for 5 firestones after paying back Protector Leng's points. Then he continued to cook. After the meal was done, Zhao Feng came in, and 2 vans stopped near the door. Inside the vans were flowers and grass taken from the mountain, while there was another truck carrying decorative shelves for potted plants. During the day, Ziyan, Zhang Li, and Zif talked about the flowers on the mountain, and then they decided to decorate the restaurant. After getting Zhang Han's consent, they informed Zhao Feng to make arrangements. Ziyan specially told Zhao Feng that aside from roses, other flowers could be brought here. Why? Because on the second floor, that bunch of 999 roses was still blooming. She hoped that it would remain the only bunch of roses in the restaurant that represented love. Sometimes, Xian would behave like a little girl because Zhang Han was her first love, and generally speaking, women are more demanding of their first love. Though Xian had been very assertive and strong after years of struggle, she enjoyed being a little girl in Zhang Han's tenderness. Zhang Han enjoyed Xian's change, especially their positions in bed, which began to increase. Zhang Han was not in a hurry because there would be a lot of time for them to get along with each other in the future, and he would get what he deserved. After entering the restaurant, Zhao Feng took a look at Liang Mengkai and smiled at her. With Liang Hao at the table, there was no place for Zhao Feng. Sometimes Zhao Feng would think that it was time to change to a group of larger tables. Considering the size of the restaurant, Zhao Feng gave up the plan. If the tables were larger, the restaurant would be too crowded. After greeting everyone, Zhao Feng went directly to the kitchen counter. "Master, I've taken all those treasures to the mountain and brought back some flowers and ornaments. There are 1,136 night-luminescent pearls in total, and I brought back 22. Okay." Zhang Han nodded. At this time, Zhang Han finished the last dish and began to take the dishes to the second floor with Zhao Feng. At this time, because there were 3 little guys, the atmosphere on the second floor was very active. The chubby Wang Yihan was having a good time with Meng Meng and started to speak in a loud voice. Conversely, Wu Guang was very shy, and he had been acting as a junior attendant of the two and obeying them. The adults here stopped talking and watched the 3 little guys play. Seeing Zhang Han and Zhao Feng serving the dishes, Wang Yi and Zhang Li also went downstairs to help, and the table was soon filled. Looking at the delicious food on the table made all of their mouths water. Wang Jiaxuan and her husband were still a bit constrained. After all, this was the first time coming to Zhang Han's restaurant. When they saw Zhang Han cooking and serving, they looked at each other and were moved. It's admirable that a man as great as Mr. Zhang is also a good man who understands life. They thought of a few partners who were not in a high position, but employed a lot of nannies to ensure their quality of life, and they were even a little picky. It was impossible for them to cook, but now, when they saw the table full of delicious food, they were envious for a while. Sometimes, cooking by yourself was also a kind of self-cultivation. It's amazing that Han can cook so many dishes. Rong Jiaxin smiled at Zhang Han. Yes, yes. Meng Meng nodded and said proudly, "My papa is the most powerful." This sentence was almost Meng Meng's mantra. But Zhang Han was always happy when he heard this sentence. Sometimes, Zhang Han would even come up with some ideas to make further efforts. He wanted to be that omnipotent father adored by Meng Meng all the time. But he also hoped that one day his daughter would achieve more than himself, which would make him happier. It made sense to hope that their children would become the dragon and phoenix among people. Zhang Han didn't know when he started to have the relatively contradictory idea that he wanted to see Meng Meng grow up step by step while also having her stay a lovely little girl and princess. In fact, Zhang Han knew that this was the meaning of father. Everyone began to eat and talk less. The 3 little guys, each with a roast pig's hoof, had greasy mouths. Even Wang Yihan's face was covered with oil. However, she said indifferently, "It's so delicious." After dinner at about 8 o'clock, they sat on the sofa to have tea, and the 3 little ones were playing with toys. At 8:30, Wang Jian took them away. In the evening, they would go to Wang Qing's house with 3 bedrooms and 1 hall, where they planned to stay the night. Xian looked at Zhang Li and said, "The flowers have arrived, let's put them on display." "Okay, let's go." Zif smacked her butt and stood up. "I'll go, too, let's go, let's go." Meng Meng climbed down from the sofa and ran to the stairs. As soon as she ran 2 steps, Zhang Han caught her and held her in his arms. With a smile on his lips, Zhang Han walked quickly to the stairs and said, "Let's go, we are the first ones." "Well, we are first, we are the fastest," Papa and I are the fastest." Meng Meng looked back with her big eyes while cheering. According to the little lady's expression, it seemed that being the first to go downstairs was the happiest thing. Sometimes it is easy for children to be satisfied. Xian and the others couldn't help laughing as they went downstairs. At this time, on the first floor of the restaurant, only Zhao Feng was sitting at the members' dining table playing with his mobile phone. Seeing the crowd coming down, he stood up and led them out. He took all the goods out of the van. Among them were flowers, grass, soil, and barrels of spirit water, night-luminescent pearls. That should be almost enough. Zhao Feng looked at Xian and said, "Look at the shelves on that truck, and there are all kinds of shapes and sizes. You can choose what you need." "Okay." Xian nodded and looked at the van next to her. The long one could be placed on the right side of the piano, which would separate those tables. There are grooves on it, and we can put the grass on it directly as long as a few flowers and 2 night-luminescent pearls. Xian pointed to a shelf on the truck. "I'll get it." Zhao Feng jumped directly from the truck on the left and took the shelf down. "This long shelf can be put on the left side of the kitchen." Xian pointed to a longer shelf. Zif also pointed to one and said, "These 2 short ones can be put under 2 windows." "Yes, this one, too." Xian nodded. So they began to choose. While the others were giving advice, Xian made the final decision. After all, she was the hostess who had the right to speak. Zhang Han stood by with Meng Meng in his arms. Meng Meng waved her little arm from time to time. All of them, after the selection, Xian, Zif, Zhang Li, and Wang Ya started to take action. Instead of letting the others work, they put on gloves and did it themselves. Xian had learned how to arrange flowers, so transplanting was very simple for her. It just required soil. While the others were busy, Zhang Han and Meng Meng sat in front of the piano. Zhang Han was playing the piano, while Meng Meng was humming in his arms. Xian first planted 4 flowers on the shelf on the right side of the piano. Just as she was about to plant grass, she thought about it and pouted with her mouth, a little frustrated. Just after Zhang Han finished playing a piano piece, she said, "Zhang Han, come and take a look, is the gap in the grass a little big?" Hearing this, Zhang Han stood up, looked at the shelf, and said with a smile, "Not bad, it's neat and nice. It's beautiful, Mama is amazing." Meng Meng praised her. Hearing this, Xian was very happy. She chuckled and said, "But I think the gap is a little big. It's not as dense as the grass on the mountain. Let's do it together." Zhang Han chuckled and put Meng Meng on the ground to give her a night-luminescent pearl to play with. Then he went to Xian's side. The grass in the rectangular box at the top of the shelf began to gather in. Gradually, the grass became dense. "Then I'll hold the grass for you," Xian said, then stood beside Zhang Han, holding a handful of fragrant grass. When Zhang Han finished, she would hand the grass to him. In fact, these simple tasks could be completed in an instant by Zhang Han. But he enjoyed working slowly with Xian like this. There are many times when the important thing is not the result, but the process. It is like a person's life. What you enjoy is the process itself. Finally, after taking care of one shelf, Xian and Zhang Han went to the next one. They were so busy until 10 o'clock that the first and second floors of the restaurant were totally changed. These decorations added a lot of vitality to the restaurant. "Shall we turn off the light and have a look?" When they sat on the first floor, Xian smiled with satisfaction at the results, and looked at several night-luminescent pearls. "Okay." Zif got up and went to the back. "I'll turn off the lights." The lights went out. 12 night-luminescent pearls on the first floor began to shine softly. "Well, how beautiful!" Meng Meng blinked and cheered. "Wonderful!" The crowd marveled. It was a very special experience. After watching for a few minutes, they turned on the lights to light up the dining room. It was nearly 10:30, so they went back home. Zhang Li didn't plan to go back to work these days. The low building next to the main building of the company was about to be completed. Zhang Li thought about it and decided to take a vacation for herself. At 10:30, Zhang Han, holding Meng Meng, went upstairs with Xian. After turning off the light, although there were no pearls in the bedroom, the soft light from the first and second floors could still shine into the room. Now Xian was not shy to change into her pajamas in front of Zhang Han. After putting pajamas on Meng Meng, the mother and daughter quickly got into bed, and the last one was Zhang Han. I'm going to continue the story. The king of dwarfs and the king of elves were in the sea. They found. After telling the story for more than 10 minutes, Zhang Han found that both the mother and daughter were asleep. Zhang Han shook his head because he had planned to do something romantic. But Xian was so tired last night that she even lost her voice. Now she might be a little tired due to lack of sleep. However, Zhang Han was confused by Xian having such mysterious energy in her body, but her physical quality was very common. When she talked too much, her voice would become dry, and she would also get sick like ordinary people. Even after drinking several bottles of Yanqing water, her health had not improved except for her skin. I'll make some medicinal pellets for her tomorrow. Zhang Han planned to improve Xian's strength if she could absorb the medicinal pellets. Only by empowering herself could she be safe at all times. The night went by silently. The next morning, Zhang Han got up first to prepare breakfast. By 7 o'clock, the mother and daughter got up. Wash and brush, brush and whiten your teeth. After Xian brushed Meng Meng's teeth, Meng Meng hummed happily. Xian dealt with the little girl first, and then started to clean herself. As she combed her hair, she also hummed, hum, ah. Upon humming a few words, Xian suddenly froze. She thought for a moment, and suddenly her big eyes lit up. Oh, yes. She hurriedly found a pen and paper in the drawer and wrote down a few lines. Then she looked at the words and hummed a few more times, the light in her eyes getting more and more bright. She quickly took out her mobile phone and dialed Zuf's number. Fi, are you out? No? That's great. Bring me a guitar, I have some inspiration to write songs. She looked at the short sentences she had written, hummed, and hurried to the stairway. Honey, come here. Papa, come here. Meng Meng said in Xian's tone. Hearing this, Zhang Han put down his work and walked up the stairs. What's wrong? Zhang Han asked. Listen to my melody, hum. Xian hummed a few words, looked at Zhang Han with expectation, and asked, how is it? Huh? Zhang Han was stunned. He thought for a while, then looked at Xian and said with a smile, okay, it's very good. My honey is amazing, and this song will surely become popular. Ha ha. Xian was very happy to be praised. Then I won't accompany you this morning, I'll finish writing this song. Yes, don't get too tired. I'll make breakfast first, Zhang Han said with a chuckle and went downstairs again. When breakfast was ready, Zhang Li, Rong Jiaxin, and the others also arrived. After breakfast, Zif and Xian stayed in the restaurant to work, and no one else bothered them. Zhao Feng asked Leng to go and accompany Xian, while he and Zhang Han took the others to Mount New Moon. Since the furnace, firestones, and spirit treasures were all ready, Zhang Han thought that it was time to harvest. Chapter 417, Alchemy. At the foot of Mount New Moon, when everyone got out, Meng Meng saw Zhao Feng take out 3 long cylinders and 2 or 3 buckets from the trunk, and asked curiously, Papa, what's that? That's fishing gear, it's for fishing, Zhang Han said with a chuckle. What is it? Meng Meng asked curiously. Fishing tools. Zhang Han explained in detail. The fishing rod is long, and there's a thin line on it. At the bottom of the line is a hook, and we can bait the hook for the little fish to eat when they see it. Once they bite it, they will be caught and we can eat them. Then I want to eat prawns. Can I catch the prawns made by Papa last time? Meng Meng asked. Meng Meng, you can't catch prawns with a fishing rod. What you need is a net. We have a fishing net here and I'll catch some prawns for you later. We can eat them when we go back at noon, Wang Ming said with a smile. Great. Meng Meng mumbled vaguely, looking left and right with her big eyes. When they crossed the jungle and came to the lawn, Meng Meng said, Papa, please let me down. I'll go to find Big Hai Hai and Little Hai Hai. Ha ha, give Dad a kiss. Zhang Han smiled. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Meng Meng kissed Zhang Han 3 times with her little pink lips. After Zhang Han put her on the lawn, she ran up happily, shouting as she ran, Big Hai Hai, Little Hai Hai, I'm coming. Ooh ooh, ow ooh. 2 voices came from the back mountain. As usual, Little Hai appeared first, then Dai. Although it was the same every time, Dai and Little Hai were very happy, and so was Meng Meng, as if they would never have enough fun. Zhang Han looked at the little girl's back tenderly. Today, Meng Meng was wearing a white short-sleeved shirt, jeans, and pink sneakers. Xian gave her a Mickey Mouse hairdo and didn't put on her hat, which made her look more lovely when she ran. Instead of rushing to make medicinal pellets, Zhang Han first went to the back mountain and played with Meng Meng for a while. Meng Meng, play with your friends for a while, Daddy's going to do something else. Zhang Han touched Meng Meng's little head while speaking. Okay, got it. Meng Meng responded and ran to Dai. Zhang Han smiled and shook his head, then he got up and went to the Thunder Yang tree. I'll take a look, too. Wang Ming followed him. After arriving at the Thunder Yang tree, Zhang Han pondered for 10 seconds in front of the 5 elements furnace. With a wave of his hand, the spiritual herbs flew to the ground in front of him, and a firestone flew toward the 5 elements furnace and began to burst into flames. Is it going to start? Wang Ming was a little excited. He was curious because it was the first time for him to see others making medicinal pellets. Yes. Zhang Han nodded and began to control the herbs to fly into the 5 elements furnace. The first one to be put in was Baigang grass. As a 3rd stage spirit treasure, Baigang grass could improve the quality of the body, especially one's strength. This first batch of medicinal pellets were all Heiyuan pellets that Zhang Han had planned to give to Dai. They could improve Dai's physical fitness and power, and strengthen its bones. With Baigang grass and another 3rd stage spirit treasure, Jinlian leaf, as the main ingredients, and supplemented by 36 kinds of spiritual herbs, 17 of which were 2nd stage and 19 of which were 1st stage, and then mixed with Yanking water, Zhang Han was sure that he would make the best Heiyuan magical pellets. After the Baigang grass was sent into the 5 elements furnace, with Zhang Han's eyes shining, the flame suddenly increased 10-fold. After 10 standard seconds, Zhang Han reduced the flame several levels. At this time, the Baigang grass had turned into granular smoke, which filled the 5 elements furnace. Under Zhang Han's control, the smoke from the Baigang grass was compressed into a small area, and then he put the Jinlian leaf into the furnace. The fire rising up again was even stronger than before. This time, it took 10 minutes for the flame to reduce several levels. The Jinlian leaf had also turned into a granular luminous mist, which was light gold and compressed behind the blue smoke. The light fog was like 2 tadpoles, rotating in the 5 elements furnace. Next, Zhang Han put in a small amount of Yanking water. Swish. The Yanking water immediately turned into smoke, forming a circle around the 2 light fog columns. Next, Zhang Han put in 36 kinds of spiritual herbs in turn. They formed an emerald green grinding plate, covering the inner wall of the 5 elements furnace. If Wang Ming could have seen this scene, he would have shouted, "Isn't it a G-graph?" However, Wang Ming couldn't see the inside of the 5 elements furnace, so he stood aside, looked at it for more than half an hour, and finally shook his head. "I don't know what it is, Han, take your time, I'm going fishing." "Okay," replied Zhang Han. With that, Wang Ming went back to the pet area, picked up his fishing gear and folding stool, went to the fish pond, and began to fish. Enjoying the breeze and looking at the beautiful scenery, Wang Ming said happily, "What a wonderful life. Zhang Han stood in front of the five elements furnace and watched it. The wind swept his face and his short hair fluttered slightly. In the process of alchemy, he was also surrounded by the chi of immortals. This made Zhao Feng, who stood in silence behind, adore Zhang Han even more. As time went by, all the energy in the five elements furnace was continuously condensed. After an hour and a half, they finally agglomerated into a palm-sized pellet. The medicinal pellet was light blue and glowing, but it was not done yet. Complete. Suddenly, a light burst out from Zhang Han's eyes, and the firestone below burst. Then the light blue flame began to surround the five elements furnace. 1 second, 2 seconds. Finally, after the 10th second, the flame dissipated and a blue light flew out of the furnace. Zhang Han waved his hand, and the medicinal pellet flew into his palm. The Heiyuan magical pellet with a diameter of about 3 centimeters had been made successfully. Looking at a mist floating on the surface of the pellet, Zhang Han smiled faintly. A third-stage Heiyuan magical pellet with the best quality. Its effect was equivalent to a fourth-stage Heiyuan magical pellet, which was enough to enhance Dai's strength. Thinking of this, Zhang Han turned his head and looked at the back mountain. Seeing that Dai and Meng Meng were playing happily, Zhang Han smiled and gave up on calling Dai to come and take the pellet immediately. Then I'll make the Kunluo pellet. According to Zhang Han's plan, he would spend the morning making Heiyuan and Kunluo magical pellets for Dai and Little Hai, and make other pellets in the afternoon. Just at this time, Zhao Feng came over and said, "Master, Liang Hao contacted me half an hour ago. He and Grand Master He have arrived at the foot of the mountain. Because Master was making the pellets, I didn't let them come up the mountain." "Oh, you can let them come here," Zhang Han said. He was going to have a rest. In the eyes of Wang Ming and Zhao Feng, the process of alchemy just now was very relaxed and casual. But in fact, Zhang Han was very serious. Though there were so many spiritual herbs, most of them were below the third stage, and once the furnace exploded, Zhang Han had to find the raw materials again. Therefore, it was very tiring to concentrate on refining for more than an hour. Although the Heiyuan magical pellets had been made, it was still difficult to make the Kunluo pellets next, so Zhang Han decided to take a rest and adjust himself. Since He Chen happened to come here during this period, Zhang Han planned to meet them first. "I'll call them." Zhao Feng nodded and started to make the phone call. Then they strolled forward to the mountain area. Zhao Feng was a little excited. After watching Zhang Han for a while, he couldn't help asking, "Master, can I defeat Dai after taking the pellet at this time?" Recently, there had been many people on the mountain, and Dai knew that there were 2 elders, so it had behaved better than before. However, it still pushed Zhao Feng 5 or 6 times, and every time Zhao Feng was pushed, he went back 7 or 8 meters. This made Zhao Feng feel very helpless, who planned to push Dai several times after his strength promotion. Yesterday, the master said that he would give the pellets to him. Zhao Feng was so excited that he almost could not sleep last night. But he was destined to be disappointed. Zhang Han looked at Zhao Feng with a smile, shook his head under Zhao Feng's expectant gaze, and said mercilessly, "You can't defeat it. After eating the Heiyuan magical pellet, Dai should be able to advance to the middle stage of Qi training, that was, the Earth stage master level." Although Zhao Feng would also take the third stage pellet, he would not get as much of a promotion. Zhao Feng was now at the peak of inward strength, and he could advance to the early stage of Qi refining at most with the help of the pellet. Although Zhang Han could make him advance to the peak of the Qi refining stage at a faster speed, which was only a step away from the level of Grand Master, it would add too much trouble to Zhao Feng's later cultivation and even destroy Zhao Feng's future. A cultivator with an unstable root was not allowed. Zhang Han did not rush to advance to the middle stage of building base, either. He knew that advancing with medicinal pellets would not benefit him a lot, and he was better off advancing to the innateness stage later with the help of Thunder Yang Wood. At this time, Zhao Feng's mouth quivered slightly after he heard Zhang Han's words. "Okay, I'll endure it." Zhao Feng smiled and shook his head. Although he wanted to beat Dai several times, he had a better relationship with Dai and Little Hai actually. They had just walked half the way when Liang Mengkai walked out of the jungle happily. Besides Liang Hao, He Chen and 3 other middle-aged men were following her. "Boss, here we are." Liang Mengkai waved and said hello from afar, with a sweet smile, but then she turned and ran to the flower sea area on the side. Liang Hao looked at her with a smile and took the lead to come up to Zhang Han. "Boss." Liang Hao smiled politely and said, "This is Grand Master He Chen, whom I mentioned to you." "Hello, Master Zhang." He Chen reached out and said politely, "In the last battle of Strange Peak Island, Master Zhang's performance was admirable. I heard that Liang Hao knew Master Zhang, so I came here to visit you." "Hello." Zhang Han nodded lightly, shook hands with He Chen, and said, "I heard that you are all from Singapore." "That's right." He Chen said with a smile, "I'm here to protect them. This is He Banqing, my nephew, who runs the family business. This is Huang Yuan, the president of the Singapore Chamber of Commerce and the head of the Huang family. This is Lu Xuan, the head of the Lu family. No one from the Zi family?" Zhang Han asked. The Zi family was also a business family in Singapore. How could they not send anyone to participate in this business negotiation? "Mr. Zhang," Huang Yuan said, "the reason why the Zi family didn't come is that their main businesses are all in China. In addition, they are busy with several large businesses recently, so they have no time to participate in this negotiation." "I see." Zhang Han nodded. Although Huang Yuan didn't tell him directly, it could be guessed from his expression and tone that the relationship between the Zi family and their circle might not be very good. The Zi family is also a famous family mainly engaged in business. The elders is not in charge of the family business now. He is still the most authoritative member of the family. The most powerful master in the Zi family is at the Grand Master early stage, and there are several Qi strength masters in the family. He Chen thought for a moment and continued, "Zi Tengfei, the current head of the Zi family, is Ziyan's eldest uncle. I've heard that Ziyan's parents are not entrusted with important tasks, but are just executives in a subsidiary company. Now that Master Zhang has become Ziyan's husband, I'm sure that the Zi family will go up to a higher level. After returning to Singapore, I will apply for Ziyan's father to be the vice president of our Chamber of Commerce," Huang Yuan said at once. The purpose of their visit this time was to form a friendly relationship with Master Zhang through their relationship with Ziyan and their Zi family. Mr. Zhang was famous and the second director in Hong Kong. If they could maintain a good relationship with him, their business in Hong Kong would be much easier. Zhang Han was also clear about their plans. After thinking about it, Zhang Han shook his head and said, "I haven't proposed yet." He Chen and the others were stunned. Then they understood and said, "Don't worry, Master Zhang, we won't talk about it to others. I still have something to do. Please help yourself." Zhang Han nodded and said, "Then we'll leave." He Chen said with a smile, "Please inform us when Master Zhang goes to propose marriage." Huang Yuan and the others politely bid farewell to Zhang Han and turned to leave. For the first visit, they didn't plan to talk too much and didn't want to get any benefits, for their only purpose was to meet Zhang Han. Zhang Han only wanted to make preparations by reminding them. He didn't want to make both sides unhappy when proposing. What if the Zi family asked him, "Who are you? Where do you come from? How much are you worth? Can you match Ziyan?" Zhang Han was afraid that he would be unable to stop himself from slapping the questioner to death. No Grand Master could be insulted, let alone Zhang Han. He didn't like that kind of gossiper, and in the cultivation world, few people gave a speech before the war. Back on the mountain, Zhang Han adjusted himself and started the second round of medicinal pellets in the furnace. These were the Luokun pellets. There were 3 main materials. Feng Shui wood, a third-stage spirit treasure, helped to improve the body's qualification and speed through the power of wind. Obviously, it was very suitable for Little Hai, who was characterized by fast speed. In addition to that, there was also Jinlian leaf, which had been used once before. Among the 9 third-stage spirit treasures, 2 third-stage spirit treasures had both been used by Zhang Han. The third one was Kamai Bamboo, a third-stage spirit treasure that could increase the chances of gaining a certain ability when the cultivator was advancing. As the saying goes, it was the awakening of talent. Kunluo pellets could be made with the 3 kinds of spirit treasures as the main materials, and 37 kinds of second-stage spirit treasures and 68 kinds of spirit treasures as the auxiliary materials. Kunluo pellets could not only increase the strength of the cultivators, but also improve their physical fitness, enhance their ability to use the wind, improve their movement speed, and give the cultivators a chance to obtain a talent. Zhang Han moved another firestone to the lower side of the 5 elements furnace. With the process of refining, various kinds of spirit treasures were added into the furnace. An hour and a half later, whoosh, a fire-red light came from the furnace. As Zhang Han grabbed the pellet and looked at it, his eyes lit up. Good fortune. It was a third-stage Kunluo pellet, the first divine-level medicinal pellet Zhang Han had made after his rebirth. Chapter 418, 2 High-Haze Make Breakthroughs. After the 2 furnaces of pellets were refined, it was 11:30. Zhang Han looked back and found that Meng was sitting on Dai's belly and Little Hai was leaning against Dai. Rong Jiaxin and the others were next to Little Hai, and there were also dozens of dogs around them. It looked very warm and sweet. Zhang Han walked over and held Meng in his arms. Then, he kissed her little rosy face and said with a smile, "It's 11:30, we should go back for lunch. How about we come back here later in the afternoon?" Meng pouted her little mouth and said, "Oh, okay, I'll ask Mama to come here in the afternoon. Then let's go back." Han, look at the fish I've caught, take a look at which one we won't need and I'll throw it back. Wang Ming brought the bucket over. There were many fish inside, among which were 3 large Qingjiang fish, 2 catfish, 1 grass carp, and a few small crucians. There were more prawns inside because Meng said in the morning that she wanted to eat some. Wang Ming kept that in mind and caught more prawns especially for her. Both Rong Jiaxin and Wang Ming had taken Meng as their own granddaughter. They also hoped that Wang Ya could find a good husband and give birth to a cute baby boy. Of course, a cute little girl like Meng would also be okay. However, Wang Ya just got over a painful relationship and they knew that it wasn't the right time. Take them all back, Zhang Han replied while taking the lead at the front with Meng in his arms. A group of people followed him, as well as the 2 high powers. When he arrived at the mountaintop, Zhang Han stopped with a smile on his lips. He looked at Dai and Little Hai, saying, "You two, sit down." Whoosh. Little Hai sat down immediately. "Oh?" Dai scratched its head and sat down on its big butt. "Open your mouth," Zhang Han said. Both Dai and Little Hai opened their mouths. Whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, 2 streams of light flew into their mouths. Dai ate the light blue Heiyuan magical pellet, while Little Hai ate the scarlet Kunluo magical pellet. Ooh, 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 ooh. Dai smacked its lips and got anxious. Then, it barked at Zhang Han. It was too fast. "I haven't tasted it yet. Papa, what did you feed them?" Meng asked with confusion. "I fed them some food," Zhang Han answered before taking the lead to go downhill. "What kind of food? Can I eat it?" Meng said eagerly. Zhang Han smiled and answered softly, "You can't eat it now, but you can eat it when you grow up. Dad will leave all the best things for you." "Wow, mwah, 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 Papa is the best, but, when will Meng grow up?" Zhang Han was surprised by that question. After thinking for 3 seconds, he smiled and replied, "When Meng, when you're so tall, you're grown up." Zhang Han extended his right hand and gesticulated a height of about 1.7 meters. "How tall is that, Papa? Papa, put me down and let me see how tall it is." Meng twisted her little body in Zhang Han's arms. After Zhang Han put her on the ground, she raised her head and looked at Zhang Han while asking, "Papa, how tall is it? When you're this tall?" Zhang Han gesticulated again. "Oh, that's so tall. Can I be that tall?" "Of course you can." Zhang Han chuckled and then held Meng in his arms again before kissing her rosy face. He was over 1.8 meters tall and Xian was 1.75 meters. With such genes, it was estimated that Meng would be taller than 1.7 meters. "No, Papa." Meng suddenly froze. "What's wrong?" Zhang Han asked with confusion. "When I'm that tall, you'll give the best food to me, but what will Mama eat?" Meng asked while blinking her big bright eyes. "Of course I'll also give your mom the best, too. Both of you will eat the best food." "No, I'll make sure you and Mom always eat the best food," Zhang Han said softly. "Papa is the best, I love you." Meng held Zhang Han's neck with her small arms more tightly and moved her little head closer, looking very happy. Zhang Han looked like he was intoxicated by that, with endless softness in his eyes. He was really satisfied with such a life. After finding his parents, the whole family would stay there to live a simple and plain life. That had gradually become Zhang Han's greatest desire. "It'll be soon, 1 year at most." Zhang Han looked straight ahead, with decisiveness in the depths of his eyes. "For that purpose, even if I need to break the sky or penetrate the ground, or I need to be faced with a formidable foe, I won't be afraid. To achieve that, even if I need to walk on numerous dead bodies, I won't care." After becoming a father, Zhang Han's thoughts had changed a lot inadvertently, but it seemed that everything was changing in a better direction. When Zhang Han and Meng were talking, Wang Ming and the others did not speak. They just watched the father and daughter in front of them silently. While listening to their conversation, Rong Jiaxin secretly sighed. Time flies. Ya was also very cute when she was little, but now she's grown up in the blink of an eye. Alas! Wang Ming sighed out loud, feeling a little sad. He felt that he wasn't a qualified father for Wang Ya. If he could go back in time, he would also love her like that. But, it's still not too late. Wang Ming looked at Wang Ya, who was next to him, with guilt and love in his eyes. He took her hand. Wang Ya's body trembled, looking at the white hair on both sides of his forehead. Her eyes became red. Then, she lowered her head while walking silently. Sometimes, a person could be moved inadvertently, maybe by a look, an action, or a sentence. Zhao Feng was walking by their side. He also sighed deep inside, wondering when Liang Mengkai would agree. After seeing Zhang Li, who was next to him, by accident, he smiled helplessly. The master's sister seems to have some feelings for me, and Mengkai's brother obviously likes her. Liang Hao even went to talk to Zhao Feng because of Zhang Li. They talked too much, and he told him such things as, "You like my sister, right? Ahem, I fully support you. Let me tell you, her birthday is, she likes to eat, she likes to wear, she likes to play. What's all this mess?" Zhao Feng felt it was such a headache. It was like a fast knot and he didn't know when it could be solved. The group of people got in the cars and went back to the restaurant, not far from the Thunder Yang tree on the mountain. After Dai and Little Hai ate the medicinal pellets, they felt some clear streams spread throughout their bodies. Instead of following them, they watched Zhang Han and his people go down the mountain. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Dai looked at Little Hai and suddenly screamed twice. Then, it seized itself by the throat with its own hands before rolling back its eyes and falling to the ground. "Oh no, I'm poisoned, I'm going to die." Ah! It scared more than 30 dogs in the pet area. "What's wrong with our boss? Is it going to die?" Ow ow ooh. Little Hai barked twice with disdain. After hearing that, Dai sat up directly and barked. Ooh 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 ooh. Didn't it like it? Little Hai shook its head continuously. "It's lame, you're the worst actor of the year." Ooh. Dai clenched its fist and was about to express something. Suddenly, its eyes widened and it became short of breath. Feeling like being burned by fire, it fell on the lawn and continually rolled around. Little Hi's reaction was stronger. After kicking its leg, it fell on the lawn stiffly. It was constantly trembling, as if having convulsions. The two of them felt extremely painful. In fact, being promoted should be a very enjoyable process, but for such ordinary animals as Dai and Little Hi, they had to bear more pain on that road. Dai and Little Hi also knew what was going on, so they were enduring it. Click, 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 click. Little Hi seemed to be trapped in a cold place, where it was freezing cold. It felt like the biting wind was constantly blowing over its body, bones, and internal organs. Little Hi's teeth constantly collided with each other, making a series of sounds. After nearly 10 minutes, a tooth suddenly turned into powder, followed by a second, a third. Soon, all its teeth were shattered. But then, it felt that it was no longer so cold and painful. Its teeth were itchy. If someone could see it, they would find that the teeth grew out again one by one in its mouth, shining like treasures. At the same time, all its original claws fell out and some sharp-edged claws grew in their place. The soles of its feet were constantly changing, and scarlet light kept flowing. At last, it became twice as thick as before and was no softer than Dai's skin in the past, which could withstand faster speed. In addition to those changes, there were also others. The most important thing was that its strength was rapidly improving. It was more exaggerated for Dai. The hair on its whole body fell out and it had a completely new look. At the same time, crisp sounds were heard from all its bones, just like they were fractured, and its size was becoming bigger and bigger. 2.1 meters, 2.2 meters, 2.3 meters. It eventually grew to 2.5 meters tall. With a bigger size, its arms and legs became thicker. Besides that, its eyelids, nose, ears, throat, and other key points were also constantly strengthening. But the biggest change was the illusory body copper coin that it wore in front of its chest. Under the attack of some blue light, it cracked. It turned into some smog that went in through its eyes. Oh, Dai was stunned. Then, it felt refreshed, and the feeling of fullness and sense of strength made it murmur, "Whoa!" Just then, the changes in Little Hi's body were also complete. Its size did not change, but its body became better proportioned. That series of changes stunned the other animals in the pet area. "Oh gosh, the boss is getting bigger, it's awesome." Under the attention of those animals, suddenly, why did our boss become smaller? They saw that while Dai's eyes were rolling, its body became smaller and smaller, and it finally became 1.5 meters tall. It lowered its head and looked around. Ooh, it disliked that, so it barked. Then, its body became bigger again, returning to 2.5 meters tall. Ooh, ooh, ooh. This is more like it. Being strong is great. Dai thought about it happily, but suddenly, he scratched his head, because it became 1.7 meters tall again and its appearance changed constantly. At last, it looked like Zhao Feng in a suit. Oh? Dai's eyeballs rolled and it reached out its hand to push itself. Then, it pretended to be like Zhao Feng and staggered 7 or 8 meters. Looking very poor, it groaned. Ooh ooh ooh, ooh 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 ooh. It was expressing, "Boss, forgive me, I was wrong, forgive me." Ooh ooh ooh, Little Hi barked with disdain. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Dai muttered. It reached out its hands to take off its clothes to see whether its muscles were like Zhao Feng's or like itself, but found that it was all hair. Oh? It turned out that only its appearance could be changed. Dai scratched its head and its eyes rolled while its body was changing. Then, it became like a hostess, in sportswear and with a hat. Ooh ooh ooh, ooh 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 ooh. Dai barked in a low voice. It seemed to be asking Little Hi, "How is it? Do I look like her? When the host comes next time, I'll show this to him." It twisted its body after barking. Little Hi also barked twice after seeing that. "You dare to change into the hostess's appearance and show off here? If the host sees that, I'm afraid you'll be beaten." Ooh. ooh, ooh, ooh. Dai repeatedly shook its head and changed back to its own appearance. It was very satisfied with being 2.5 meters tall. Then, it pointed to Little Hai and barked a few times. Did you have any changes? Little Hai grinned at Dai, and fangs that would make people feel cold and breathless were seen. Ooh, 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 ooh. Dai stretched out its hand and pressed Little Hai's teeth a few times. Then, it widened its eyes. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Damn, bro, you have really sharp teeth. Then, it made a gesture, meaning it was awesome. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Little Hai looked at Dai and expressed, bro, look at your size now. I'm afraid that in a few years, the mountains cannot contain you. Ooh, ooh, ooh. What can I do? I'm also very helpless. After barking for a while, Little Hai suddenly fixed its eyes on the box under the Thunder Yang tree. It moved its body. Whoosh! It turned into a black shadow and reached the box very quickly. It stared at the box for a short while and finally pulled out a palm-sized piece of jade. Dai looked at it in shock. Little Hai began to eat it. After chewing it up, it swallowed it. Ooh, 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 ooh. Dai was shocked. Bro, don't take things to heart. Why did you eat such a hard thing? Ow whoa ow ow whoa. Little Hai barked twice, meaning that it could absorb the energy in there. Ooh ooh. Dai shook his head, showing that it didn't agree. If it were me, I wouldn't eat it even if I could absorb it. Come on, let's go kill the hairy pig and celebrate the big day. Whoosh. Little Hai moved again. Like a black shadow, it crossed the Hungarian sheep pig's area and went directly to the jungle. When it stopped, a sheep pig was already in its mouth. Dai curled its lips and stepped with its feet, jumping a dozen meters high and more than 20 meters forward. After jumping a few times, it also arrived in the jungle. Under the attention of many pet dogs, the two of them entered the jungle again. After a while, some smoke gradually rose up there. If Zhang Han was there, he would surely find that Dai and Little Hai's strength had reached the late Qi refining stage. In other words, they were already Heaven stage masters. Besides, they also gained more abilities respectively, which was an unexpected surprise. Zhang Han originally predicted that they would reach the middle Qi refining stage. Since they had reached the late stage, it was really a good thing beyond expectations. Back at the restaurant, when Zhang Han and the others left after breakfast, there were only 6 people in the restaurant, including Leng. They were sitting quietly on the side. After a while, Zif went downstairs and saw no outsiders there. Then, she said, Elder Sister Yan, there are no guests, let's go downstairs. Ziyan walked down with a pen and paper, while Zif was holding a guitar. After walking to the piano, Ziyan opened the cover, closed her eyes, and began to play with inspiration in her mind. Although Ziyan couldn't play the piano as great as Zhang Han and she wasn't like a professional piano master, she could also play melodies as she desired. She closed her eyes and her mind was filled with the sweet memories of her and Zhang Han together. Then, she put her slender fingers on the piano. With eyes closed, she played while humming. D-D-A-la-D-D-A. After humming for a while, Ziyan quickly wrote down the lyrics she thought of. Then, she hummed and wrote down the lyrics again. She played the piano or played the guitar, devoting herself to the song. As usual, Zif sat quietly at the other side and didn't bother her. Just like that, Ziyan sat there for more than 3 hours. It was 11 o'clock. Fi. The first big section of lyrics and a rough melody of the accompaniment have been finished. Come and check it out. Ziyan picked up the guitar and said with a smile, Okay, sing it to me please. Zif sat up. Their conversation also attracted the attention of Leng and the others. They looked at Ziyan and knew that she created a song. They found it very interesting because they were still ordinary people more than 2 months ago. But they could sit there and witness the hostess creating songs at the moment. Listening to the melody earlier, they guessed that it was like a romantic song about love. Ziyan cleared her throat and moved her hands on the guitar. The melodious sound of the guitar was heard, followed by Ziyan's beautiful voice. I close my eyes and breathe next to your heart. At this moment on the earth, there are only us. Your smiling lips hooked my heart. Every single second, I want to kiss you. I just love you like this. I love you all the time. I love your coat. I love your taste. I love being in your arms. Let's button our clothes together, then we won't separate. I love you. I love being this close to you, because of you. With the last prolonged sound, Xian stopped singing. Xian was very satisfied with the lyrics and rhythm of the first section. She hadn't had such inspiration for a long time. She opened her beautiful eyes slowly, which were filled with happiness. However, what leapt to her eyes was the stunned Zuf. She turned her head and saw that Leng and the others all turned their heads, looking out of the window. Swish! A blush rose to Xian's pretty face. She smacked her lips and looked at Zif while asking, "What do you think?" What do I think?" Zif said slowly, "Elder sister Yan, aside from you, all 7 women here are single, yet you showed off your love like that. Don't you think you're too ruthless?" Xian burst into laughter. She didn't refute, but nodded her head. "I just want to write a song about sweet love." "All right, no kidding. To be honest, elder sister Yan, this song." Zif looked very serious. She never made jokes when she was working in the past, but she had become much more relaxed and often made jokes at present. When it came to that, she deliberately drawled her voice and then sighed while shaking her head. "Hey, I seem to have seen this talented woman before. Elder sister Yan, you're really in a good state. You almost finished a great song within a morning. Great, you're awesome." Zif applauded to her face. Xian found it very funny and then asked, "I think the lyrics are fine. I'm asking you how the melody is. The accompaniment hasn't been finished yet." Chapter 419, Ineffective Pellets. Zif also became serious after hearing that. She thought for a few seconds before saying, "I think the guitar melody you just played can be the accompaniment for the first section. It's simple and can highlight your voice. The prelude can be like that. Add in some diversified accompaniment in the climax and this song will be done. The specific accompaniment needs to be done in the studio. In the afternoon, I will finish all the lyrics and find a music studio to make the accompaniment tomorrow," Xian said after thinking for a while. "Oh, it's easy. Just ask my brother-in-law to look around. The accompaniment will be done in an instant," Zif said casually. "No." Xian closed her eyes and shook her head. With a little brightness and expectation in her big beautiful eyes, she said, "I'll let him listen to it after the song is finished." Looking at Xian's happy expression, Zif covered her head while saying, "All right, elder sister Yan, you can do whatever you want, but don't always show off your love. PFFT. Xian smiled and rolled her eyes. Then, she turned to play the piano again. She played the piano for a few minutes and then played the guitar before writing down some words on the paper. Time went by fast in that way, and it was 11:30. Brother-in-law and the others are back. Zif saw from the window that a few cars were returning and told her, "Oh, oh." Xian responded and wrote down 2 sets of words on the paper before closing the piano cover. Just then, Zhang Han took the lead to walk in with Meng in his arms. He walked over to the piano and moved his head forward. Looking at the paper, he asked, "How is it going?" "Oh no!" Xian suddenly screamed and hurriedly grabbed the paper in her hand, saying, "Don't read it now, wait until I finish it." Seeing her like that, Zhang Han couldn't help laughing. "Huh?" Meng looked around in Zhang Han's arms and finally fixed her eyes on the paper in Xian's hands. Then, she muttered, "Mama, do you have a little secret?" "Ha ha ha, right, your mom has a little secret," Zif said while laughing. HMPH, Mama doesn't show it to Papa and me. Meng snorted. The little girl's behavior made all the adults on the scene laugh again and again. Xian reached out her hand and pinched her rosy face, saying, "It's not a secret, I will show it to you in a few days. You can go upstairs first, I'll go cook." Zhang Han smiled and said. Then, a group of people went to the second floor. while Zhang Han began to deal with the fish downstairs. He moved the knife very fast and all the internal organs of the fish were cleaned out. Then, the king jiang fish and grass carp were placed on the chopping board. Zhang Han held the knife with his right hand. Swish, swish, swish. The knife constantly moved back and forth, and a total of 7 fish were cleaned in 30 seconds. The fish were still on the chopping board, looking no different. But when Zhang Han grabbed one fish head and moved it gently, many fillets fell off from its body. After he threw away the fish bones, some light flashed through his pupils. Then, he waved his hand gently. In an instant, all the fish bones appeared and slowly fell into the trash can. The main dish that he planned to cook was boiled fish, which was also called fish fillets in hot chili oil. In addition to fish fillets, there were also bean sprouts and other vegetables. As a classic dish in Sichuan cuisine, it tasted spicy, tender, and refreshing. In addition to the boiled fish, he was also going to cook fried prawns, steamed egg custard, salad, and so on. The 7 fish for cooking the boiled fish, including 5 king jiang fish and 2 grass carp, were not small, so 3 would be enough for people upstairs and the rest would be for the VIP members. For Xian, who loved hot pot very much, boiled fish was also one of her favorite dishes. It tasted somewhat like hot pot and had a unique flavor, let alone that it was made with the ingredients from the mountain. By this time, Wang Ming, Rong Jiaxin, and Wang Ya finally realized that it was true when other people said that Zhang Han's cooking was particularly delicious. Wang Ming even temporarily gave up the idea of studying formations and didn't go to find if there was any place suitable for the Wang family to settle down. Instead, he directly decided to rest for a period of time. The Wang family wasn't the most influential family in Xihang, and the enterprise problem couldn't be solved in a short time, so it wasn't an urgent matter. When Zhang Han was cooking, the diners arrived one after another. Smelling the aroma of the fish in the air, all the people were tantalized. After all the dishes were done, everyone started eating. They picked up the fish fillets and brought them to their mouths. The smell of the fish permeated the mouth and the flesh was tender and delicious, which was very enjoyable. Therefore, all the chopsticks went to the boiled fish. Seeing that they ate the fish so fast, Zhang Han was stunned. It seems that I underestimated these foodies. Ahem. Just in case, Zhang Han took an empty bowl and directly filled it with fish fillets before putting it in front of Meng Meng. Wow, this is too much. I can't finish it, Meng Meng muttered while eating. After a wonderful lunch, everyone rested for a moment. Then, they went to Mount New Moon again. Xian and Zuf also followed them, with pens, paper, and other things. She planned to perfect the lyrics if she had inspiration in the afternoon. After arriving at Mount New Moon, Zhang Han went to the pet area first. He played with Meng Meng for a while and felt the strength of Dai and Little Hai. He smiled and nodded, thinking that it was great. After sitting for a while, Zhang Han went to the Thunder Yang tree and prepared to start alchemy. Xian sat on one side. After perfecting the lyrics, she stood up and said, "I'll go to have a look." Then, she went to the mountain top. Xian looked with curiosity and asked, "Will you start to refine the pellets?" Zhang Han smiled and pouted his lips slightly. "There are people around." Xian rolled her eyes to Zhang Han. Then, she looked back and found that no one noticed them, so she tiptoed and kissed his lips. Zhang Han really enjoyed Xian's kiss. Her lips were rosy and tender, and when she got closer, they would slightly pout, which were very attractive. Ha ha. Zhang Han laughed contentedly and said, "Then I'll get started." "You can start," Xian replied while holding his arm. She saw that he waved his left hand slightly and some spiritual herbs flew into the furnace, while there were blazing flames below. "Will I disturb you here?" Xian asked. "No, it isn't difficult to make these kinds of pellets," Zhang Han replied. "Oh." Xian blinked her big eyes and stared at the furnace for a while. Then, she said, "It feels like boiling soup." Sort of. Zhang Han explained. The soup made by these things is also drinkable, but the effect is not the best. The most perfect state is making it into round pellets, which have several levels according to the integration degree. That also determines the quality of the pellet's quality. The worst are the ordinary ones, then middle ones, top ones, excellent ones, and sacred ones. It's quite complicated. After I finish it later, you can try one at night. Do I also need to eat it? Then, will I become a very powerful martial artist? Zhang asked with a slight smile. Zhang Han paused. After thinking for a second, he replied, I don't think it will improve your strength because there's a secret in your body that even I don't understand. I can't see through it. When we were at the hotel earlier, you made me get promoted a lot for the first time. It was a big breakthrough. I don't know why, but I'll figure it out later. Is there a secret? Zhang licked her lips and said, Do you think I'm also like you? I don't know. Zhang Han smiled bitterly, but then he shook his head and said firmly, No matter what secret it is and no matter what will happen, you are always my wife, the one I love. Zhang chuckled. She felt so happy at that moment and her big eyes blinked. Then, she blushed a little and said in a low voice, It doesn't matter whether I'm powerful or not, your being powerful would be enough. Since you can make breakthroughs when we make love, then, when you want it, we can. What? Zhang Han narrowed his eyes and asked with a smile. Come on, you know what I'm talking about, Zhang said coyly with blushes. Ha ha ha. Zhang Han laughed happily. Just like that, Zhang Han refined the pellets while chatting with Zhang. About half an hour later, Zhang went back to play with Meng. Zhang Han was still standing there, adding spiritual herbs successively. Zhang Han knew a lot about herbs. Although it wasn't the perfect recipe, he could still refine the desired pellets with other alternatives. In addition to the 5 third-stage spirit treasures used in the morning, he also put all the other 4 third-stage spirit treasures in it, plus 79 second-stage spirit treasures and 187 first-stage spirit treasures. He used those things in order to refine a furnace of small foundation elixir. The effect of small foundation elixir was similar to that of foundation elixir, which could be used to improve one's strength. The foundation elixir refined from Yuan King fruit made Zhang Han get promoted from the early Qi refining stage to the early building base stage. It was also because Yuan King fruit was almost a 4th stage spirit treasure. Those 3-stage spirit treasures didn't have such a great effect, but the small foundation elixir made by them could also make a person break through to the building base stage from the late Qi refining stage. For people like Zhao Feng who were at the peak of the inward strength stage, they could also be promoted to the early Qi refining stage. The specific effects would vary from person to person. Not only one pellet would be produced in the furnace, with a large number of spiritual herbs, there would be more than 5, up to a maximum of 11. Zhang Han expected it to be 8 or 9. To get the elixir, all the 3rd stage spirit treasures, 90% of the 2nd stage spirit treasures, and less than half of the 1st stage spirit treasures had been used. Most of the remaining spiritual herbs were 1st stage and a small part was 2nd stage. There were no 3rd stage spirit treasures left. Zhang Han had been refining it until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. As the flames went out, several pellets flew out of the furnace. Zhang Han grabbed them all and put them in his palm. 10. Not bad. Zhang Han smiled and was very satisfied with the result. He looked at the time and found it was time to go back to cook dinner. The remaining spiritual herbs would be refined the next day. Then, Zhang Han went to the back of the mountain and played with Meng for a few minutes before going back home with all the people. When the car team just left the mountain, a helicopter whizzed over Mount New Moon. On the edge of the helicopter, there was a man with a telescope. He kept looking down and finally found a bundle of spiritual herbs under the Thunder Yang tree. Is that the earth-grade treasure Dongxi grass? Earth-grade treasure, lanky flower? Hiss, there are so many. God, the 5 elements furnace is really here. The person with the telescope got extremely excited. It was the first time that he had seen so many spiritual herbs, which were just put there randomly like haystacks. Master Zhang deserves his reputation, it's awesome. The man gasped in admiration before taking out his mobile phone and dialing a number. Brother Do, I found it. The 5 elements furnace is really on Mount New Moon and there are a large number of spiritual herbs. I got it. Back at the restaurant, everyone had hot pot for dinner. Hot pot was the most frequently eaten thing there. After all, it was so popular with the public. After the meal, all the people sat on the sofa on the second floor, resting and having tea. Wang Jiaxin looked at Xian, who was playing with Meng, and smiled slightly. Then, she looked at Zhang Han while asking, Han, you want to get married after your parents are back? That's okay for me, but shouldn't you get the marriage certificates first? You also need to register your residence. Besides, should you go to Xian's family to propose first? As soon as she said that, everybody became silent. Zif, Zhang Li, Wang Ming, and Wang Ya all looked at Zhang Han. They were all looking forward to watching them get married. Yan, I'm a straightforward person. I wonder if you have any opinions on this matter. Wang Jiaxin looked at Xian and said with a smile, Xian licked her mouth and felt a little shy. She glanced at Zhang Han and said in a low voice, I'll listen to him. Then, everyone's eyes fixed on Zhang Han again. I think Auntie is right, I intend to propose soon. Zhang Han looked at Xian with tenderness and said with a smile, then we'll get engaged, get the marriage certificates, and hold a grand wedding after fetching my parents. Yes, that's it. Wang Jiaxin laughed happily. Xian's eyes blinked and there were a series of words in the bottom of her heart. Propose, get engaged, get married, wedding. I'm going to get the marriage certificates with him. Xian felt very happy deep inside. Oh? Meng blinked her big bright eyes and looked around before she murmured something. Nobody understood what the little girl said. However, Zhang Han faintly heard her saying, taking flowers and taking beautiful photos. Apparently, the little girl still remembered what Zhang Han once said to her, when Papa and Mama get married, I'll take flowers for them. Seeing that the whole thing had been decided temporarily, the atmosphere in the house became more active. Zif, Zhang Li, and Wang Ya made jokes with Xian from time to time. There were always blushes on Xian's face. At about 10 o'clock, everyone stood up and left. Downstairs, Zhang Han took out some pellets. Zhang Han handed over 2 small foundation elixirs and said, Auntie, these 2 are for you and Uncle. Eat them after you go back. Wang Ming was quite excited by that. Wang Jiaxin smiled and asked, what are these pellets? You'll know that after eating one. Zhang Han smiled while shaking his head, let them experience it for themselves. Then, he waved to Zhao Feng, saying, you, Xiong, Ahu, Elder Meng, Leng Yi, 1 for each. Oh right. Give 1 to Instructor Liu, too. Zhang Han handed over 6 pellets. The 5 of them were the most powerful in the security group, whose strength was close to peak strength, so, the pellets' effect could be better absorbed by them. After getting the pellets, the group of people left happily. Zhang Han locked the door and turned off the light, while the night luminescent pearl downstairs was still shining. Going back upstairs, he found that Xian and Meng had just finished washing up. Here, have 1. Zhang Han brought the pellet to Xian's mouth. Xian opened her mouth and ate it obediently. She suddenly felt it was a little cool inside her body. Huh? Meng was stunned. She looked at Zhang Han with confusion while saying, Papa, where is mine? You're still too young, you can't eat it now. Xian pinched Meng's little face while speaking. Dad will give you a better one later, Zhang Han replied with a chuckle. HMPH. Meng snorted and stopped speaking. After Xian ate it, Zhang Han put his right hand on her waist to constantly feel the changes inside her body. After the pellet went down, it turned into a lot of energy and permeated the whole body. If the person could cultivate, the energy would enter the meridians and the danshan would be refined. However, it dissipated in Xian's body. It's all right, at least it can nourish the body. But some doubt appeared in Zhang Han's eyes after he saw the next scene. The energy should have nourished the body, but it constantly flew outward and was discharged through the pores. It can't be absorbed. Even a little bit can't be absorbed. Zhang Han had been observing until the last trace of energy was discharged as if her body didn't like it, which confused him a lot. It can't be absorbed at all, the pellet is ineffective. What's wrong? Chapter 420, Thinking of Proposing Marriage. Is it? Zhang Han's pupils suddenly shrank. He thought of some information that he had read before. Some people were born as talents with unique physiques, but physiques had different levels. For example, Emperor King had King Dragon blood and the details were still unknown. But even if his blood belonged to the strongest branch of King Dragon blood, it was still only the third echelon. Zhang Han was awakened back then through time traveling, which belonged to the classification of space, and the attributes were at the top of the second echelon. The attributes of the first echelon were closest to the original source, just like wind, water, fire, the sun, the moon, stars, yin, yang, life and death, and so on. Possessing the attributes of the most original power was the capital for one person to defeat those who were stronger than him. That was the main way among thousands of ways. With one of them, a cultivator could pass the tribulation easily and become an immortal. Rumors said that there were extremely special people who were born with the attributes of the first echelon. That group of people had sacred bodies. Some of them couldn't cultivate in the early stage, nor could they absorb energy. But after awakening, they would improve fast and absorb energy like drinking water. Nothing would stop them and they would go all the way to success. Was Xian born with a sacred body? Zhang Han was a bit confused. If this is the case, I've gotten the strong backing in advance, right? I'll be a kept man of my queen. No, it's not right. Even if she had a sacred body, there would still be energy fluctuations. When the inexplicable energy helped him get the 10-inch danshan, he did not feel anything at all. Even if it was a sacred body, it will not directly make people break through to the 10-inch danshan, right? I've never heard of the 10-inch danshan before. Is it that Xian's body is more powerful than a sacred body? Zhang Han thought for a while, but couldn't understand. Papa, it's time to tell the story. Meng Meng's cute words bring Zhang Han back to reality. Yeah, let's go, I'll tell the story. Zhang Han smiled and returned to the bedroom with Xian and Meng Meng. The two of them sneaked under the quilt first and then stared at Zhang Han. Zhang Han took off his clothes directly and went to the bed with underwear. Xian's big eyes blinked, since she'd bought several pajamas for Zhang Han, but he hadn't worn one yet. However, it seemed that she also didn't need to wear pajamas when they were sleeping recently. Do you still remember where we were last time? Zhang Han asked while lying on the left side of Meng Meng. I remember, many big sharks were coming and the dwarfs and elves were about to run. Meng Meng said cheerfully. I'm really so happy every night to listen to Papa tell stories. Then I'll continue. The big ship of the dwarfs and elves was chased by a large group of sharks. Seeing the ship was about to sink, they saw a very large island not far away, so, after about 20 minutes, Meng Meng fell asleep. Zhang Han smiled lightly. He moved his head closer and rubbed Meng Meng's cute little face with his nose a few times. Then, he gently lifted up the little girl and put her on the cot on the left. After going back to the big bed and lying down, he looked at Xian, finding that she was lying there silently with closed eyes and slow breathing. It looked like she was asleep, but her eyelashes were trembling. Is she pretending to be asleep again? Zhang Han looked at her with a smile and stretched out his hand under the quilt. He moved his hand from the lower side of the pajamas and then went up. When he reached the key part, he used more force. You're annoying. Xian opened her eyes. Like a snake, she pressed against Zhang Han's body. She stared at Zhang Han with tenderness while whispering, "You want to go to see my family and get engaged, but you haven't proposed to me yet. I owe you that, okay? I want to do it at a special moment," Zhang Han said softly. "HMPH, then, say you love me," Xian said while blinking her beautiful eyes. "I love you." Mwah. Xian went closer and kissed Zhang Han. "Say it once again. I love you." Mwah. "Do you want to marry me? I'm looking forward to that." Mwah. Zhang Han didn't let Xian move her head back, and the two of them had a long kiss. They had forgotten about time, but they knew it was a long time. As Xian's pajamas went missing, the two of them hugged each other tightly, and they got hotter and hotter. Zhang Han carried Xian in his arms, went all the way to the secondary bedroom, and closed the door. Xian's beautiful and sexy groans were faintly heard. Finally, she couldn't suppress it and began to scream. At the same time, below Mount New Moon, two cars were parked silently. Protector Du from the Heavenly Elixir sect took the lead and stood in the front, followed by several fellow disciples. They had been in Hong Kong for more than 3 years and their target was the Five Elements furnace. Every once in a while, Protector Du would go to the treasure house to take a look at the Five Elements furnace, but the last time he was there, he found that it was gone. The Five Elements furnace is missing? He was shocked and hurriedly called Ltanan, but he got information that disappointed him. The Five Elements furnace couldn't be exchanged temporarily. It's cancelled. Protector Du got angry. He made some investigations and found that it was actually Zhang Han Yang who had taken it away. It turned out to be him. Protector Du felt helpless. Whenever he thought of the battle on Strange Peak Island and the cards flying out of He Qingshan's body, he would feel fearful. He couldn't let it go, so he asked others to investigate. Then, he found that the Five Elements furnace was on that mountain, and in addition to that, there were still a lot of spirit treasures. However, there were only 2 spirit beasts guarding the mountain. Should I do it? Protector Du's eyes were fixed on Mount New Moon. His palms couldn't stop trembling. How about I leave Hong Kong directly after taking it away? But that means I'll become his sworn enemy. What if he comes to seek revenge? Given my strength, I'll be killed by him in an instant. Although there'll be no worries in the Heavenly Elixir sect, will I never leave the sect again for the rest of my life? What on earth should I do? Protector Du was hesitating without blinking his eyes, which became slightly red. Senior. A younger disciple at the back reminded, "Will we do it? Should I do it or not?" Protector Du's body began to tremble. His mind was still struggling at the last moment, but gradually, the scene of He Qingshan's death on Strange Peak Island constantly appeared in his mind. That sent a chill down his spine. Hiss. Puff. After taking a deep breath, he said disappointedly, "Let's go, tell 8th Elder that. We failed the mission." "Yeah, let's go. The man who could kill He Qingshan cannot be offended, am I right?" Another younger disciple said quickly, "We've been standing here for 10 minutes. If we're discovered, we won't end up well." Other people echoed, "Let's go." Just when everyone was going to get in the cars, suddenly, they all looked at the jungle in front and trembled. They saw a ghost-like, pitch-black shadow coming out of the jungle. Its gaze was as ferocious as a hungry wolf's and the fangs in its mouth reflected a chilling light. What? What is this? It's too fierce. The 2 younger disciples' expressions were a bit stiff. "Let's go, slow down a bit." Protector Du got nervous, since he felt a sense of crisis from Little Hai, who was not far away in the front. This spirit beast is definitely stronger than an Earth Stage Master. He was scared and said something in a low voice, then, he slowly returned to the car and left. Little Hai stared at the car coldly for a while and then turned to leave. He went back to Dai's side at the back of the mountain and saw that it was still snoring. Just look at it, it wouldn't know even if something was lost on Mount New Moon. Fortunately, Little Hai was reliable. After lying down beside Dai, it closed its eyes and fell asleep. In one of the 2 cars, Protector Du exhaled a long breath and shook his head again and again. "Even if we went to the mountain, I'm afraid that we wouldn't be able to take anything away. Where did he find such a high-level spirit beast? It's incredible. It cannot be offended. It cannot be offended. Protector Du completely gave up his thoughts because even if the 5 elements furnace could be exchanged, he would still need to give it to 8th Elder. He thought that he didn't have to risk his life to steal it. He found that except for 8th Elder's disciple, all the other people's attitudes were like his. Should I offend the ruthless Master Zhang just for the credit? It's not worth it. 8th Elder's strength is similar to He King Shan's. He could also be killed by Master Zhang in an instant. Even if I succeeded in stealing it today, what would I do if he shirks his responsibility and blames me for this later? After considering carefully, he decided not to take the risk. Protector Du thought that he could exchange the 800,000 points for a lot of resources for his personal use. He found that although he couldn't get the magical pellets and recipe from 8th Elder, he would still benefit a lot. After thinking for a while, those people relaxed and drove straight back to their accommodations. Meanwhile, in the restaurant, the faint and soft sounds didn't stop until 12 o'clock. After a burst of exhilarating sounds, the secondary bedroom became silent. But after less than 20 minutes, some very rhythmic sounds were heard from the secondary bedroom again. Apparently they did it once again. At 6:30 the next day, Zhang Han energetically went downstairs to cook while Xian was still sleeping. But soon after, at 7 o'clock, she was woken up by Meng. They got up and washed. Just then, the diners also arrived one after another. After a few minutes, Wang Ming, Zhang Li, and the others also arrived. Both Wang Ming and Rong Jiaxin were used to getting up early. At 6 o'clock, they went to exercise for a while on the second floor of the company. When everyone got up, they got dressed and went to the restaurant. But it wasn't that the two of them got up early on that day, it was they didn't sleep all night. After they went back and ate the pellet the previous night, Wang Ming suddenly found that I've made a breakthrough and become a Wu Dao Grandmaster, a Grandmaster, a Mu Dao Grandmaster, an awesome Wu Dao Grandmaster. Wang Ming felt like he was in a dream and he got excited. Rong Jiaxin also broke through to the late heaven stage from the profound stage. Wang Ming felt it was incredible, it was terrible. At about midnight, he dialed the phone number of his father, Wang Zhanzong. Nobody answered the first time, so he dialed again. He finally got through the 5th time. "Little brat, why are you calling me so late at night? I was just about to study a formation." "Dad, I'm a Grandmaster now." "What Grandmaster?" Wang Zhanzong asked in confusion on the phone. "Wu Dao Grandmaster. I'm a Wu Dao Grandmaster now. I made a breakthrough. I'm the 4th Grandmaster in the Wang family." Wang Ming said in excitement. "What?" Puff. A bang was heard over the phone. It seemed that the phone had fallen to the ground. Then, Wang Zhanzong hurriedly asked, "What did you say? Say it again." "I've made a breakthrough and become a Grandmaster. It's all thanks to Han. He knows about alchemy and it's very powerful, more powerful than his formations." After Wang Ming explained it for a while, Wang Zhanzong kept silent for a few minutes and finally, he signed with emotion. "He's such a talent, it's unbelievable. I seem to see that he's about to defeat all the talents of the world and become the king of the whole land." He and Rong Jiaxin were too excited to sleep for the whole night. There were also a few others who couldn't fall asleep. They were Zhao Feng, Instructor Liu, Ahu, Leng Yi, and the rest. They ate the pellets in the training room on the 3rd floor, and then, "Wow, ha ha ha, Chi Strength Master, it's awesome. I've become a Chi Strength Master. I'll make a call now." "Hello, Uncle, I have some great news to tell you. I've become a Chi Strength Grandmaster. Isn't it great? Chi Strength Master, cool." Ahu's eyes were shining with excitement. He looked at Elder Meng and laughed. "Let's have a fight, shall we? I'm not afraid of you." Elder Meng sneered. Then, the two of them began to fight. As for the other three people, Zhao Feng, Leng Yi, and Xuyong, They were also very excited, but still sat there. They were relatively calm. Chi Strength Master. Zhao Feng clenched his fist. After feeling the great power, he was amazed. Over 2 months ago, he was only a small leader in the underworld. Right, he was just a small leader, but currently, he had become a martial artist, a Chi Strength Master, which was all thanks to his master's help. Master gave me a second life. I, Zhao Feng, will use my life to guard him. With firmness in his eyes, Zhao Feng moved his body. He stood up quickly and did a simplified version of Big Dark Devil Shadow. He found that he had almost mastered all the remaining movements. Leng and Xuyong also began to practice after seeing that. They knew that they got such opportunities because of their own efforts. They wouldn't be lazy just because they had been promoted to Chi Strength Masters. They knew that there was still a big gap between them and the boss. They were also ambitious. They hoped that one day, they could become the boss's most capable assistants. So, they also stayed up all night to get familiar with their own strength. They needed some time to adjust themselves from peak strength to Chi strength. It was not until morning that they finally calmed down. When Zhao Feng and the others went to the restaurant, Zhang Han was about to bring the food to the second floor. They didn't say anything about promotion. After all, many diners were there, but there were other things that attracted their attention. Including Wang Ming and Rong Jiaxin, no one could help looking at the breakfast. Wow, we can eat small steamed buns again, brother. What stuffing is it? Zhang Li asked with a smile. There are soup dumplings and small steamed buns with vegetable stuffing. Zhang Han responded and took the lead to the second floor. Other people also helped him take the food and bring it to the second floor. In addition to steamed buns, there were cow's milk, goat's milk, boiled eggs, rice porridge, shredded potato salad, and okra salad. The breakfast was very refreshing. The word refreshing was very accurate. The small steamed buns smelled great. After one bite, one would feel its soft skin and fresh vegetable stuffing, with some dipping condiments. Those who liked vegetarian food would be addicted. For those who liked meat, the soup dumplings would be more attractive. After one bite, the delicious soup would flow through the teeth and occupy the entire mouth. That was some fresh and strong aroma, with the unique taste of meat. Eating it in one bite, one would feel the amazing combination of the dough and the meat stuffing. That taste could capture one's soul. With some dipping condiments, its taste would be neutralized, making it have a stronger flavor. When many older customers downstairs ate a few steamed buns, they always shook their heads and sighed with emotion. The taste of these steamed buns is just like the pure meat buns that we ate when we were young. The oil would flow out after one bite, but these steamed buns are more delicious than those in my memory. The aroma of breakfast permeated the whole room. After the breakfast, everyone sat there, chatting and resting. While Zhang Han was cleaning up the kitchen, a man came in lamely through the door. Zhao Feng, who was sitting next to Sun Dongying, glanced at him. He knew that that person was Wu Chengdong. Seeing that he went over to Master with a warm smile, Zhao Feng didn't stand up. Hello, Mr. Zhang, I'm Wu Chengdong, president of the Royal Entertainment Company. You can call me Xiao Wu. Zhang Han didn't speak and just glanced at him calmly. His look was calm, but Wu Chengdong felt extremely stressed, and he was very nervous deep inside. Gulp. It's so uncomfortable to talk with such a big shot. Wu Chengdong swallowed his saliva and said in a low voice, well, I'm looking for your wife to talk about the album. Oh, go upstairs, Zhang Han responded and continued working. What work? He was washing dishes. Cooking, eating, and washing dishes made Zhang Han feel that he was very close to an ordinary life. He liked that kind of life. He had been longing for such a simple and plain life. Wu Chengdong nodded after hearing the words. Okay, I'll go upstairs. He smiled after saying that, and then went to the second floor. Hello, everyone. Wu Chengdong arrived at the second floor and saw a lot of people, so he politely said hello. Then, he looked at Xian and said, I came to talk about the album. Boss Wu, sit here." Xian smiled slightly and went to the small sofa in the front with Zif. Rong Jiaxin and the others knew that they were going to talk business, so they lowered their voices. Meng Meng sat on the sofa to watch cartoons carefully and didn't make any noise. Seeing that Xian and Zuf went there, Wu Chengdong also walked lamely in that direction. After thinking about it, he said, "A few scenes were missing for the last MV, but we made some by editing the other ones. The press conference is expected to be on the 15th, right? There are still 5 days left, so I came over to ask what you think. Let's hold it according to the plan." After Xian thought for a moment, her eyes suddenly lit up. Then, she said, "Right, I have a new song that will be finished in 2 days. We can release them together. As for the MV, I want simple animation." "Okay, I will arrange it later when I go back." Wu Chengdong nodded his head like her subordinate. One's strength determined one's status. That sentence made some sense. There are 5 days left. I'll make the accompaniment today, and the finished product will be ready after I record it tomorrow, Xian said. There will be 3 days left. It's not too late. Wu Chengdong nodded. He planned to ask the department members to work overtime to make the MV. 2 days would be enough. Okay, that's it, Xian said. There is another thing. We had a meeting about this album and decided to publicize it for you for free. All the profits will be yours, Wu Chengdong said. There's no need. I'll leave its sales to you. Just take it as a full stop for me at the Royal Entertainment Company, Xian said with a slight smile. Her several songs were still in the top position on all the lists. The fans were looking forward to her new songs, so the sales of the new album could be imagined, and it would definitely be a hit. Xian would like to let the Royal Entertainment Company earn the money. Teacher Ma and the others had been working very hard, so she would show her gratitude in that way. Moreover, she also didn't want to take advantage of it. This. Wu Chengdong looked at Xian and knew that she was serious. Then, he smiled bitterly and nodded, saying, "All right, the contracts on copyright are also ready. Several companies contacted us and want to use your songs as the opening songs of their films and TV series. I won't say much about this. Just leave it to me," Zif said. "Okay, Xian, I wish you a good job and a happy life in the future. I'm going back. See you at the press conference." Wu Chengdong stood up and smiled. "Goodbye." Xian and Zuf stood up and said goodbye. Then, Wu Chengdong said goodbye and left. After a while, Zhang Han went over. After Meng Meng finished watching the cartoon, all the people set off for Mount New Moon. Xian and Zuf went to the music studio accompanied by Leng and the others. They planned to finish the accompaniment. After Zhang Han and the others arrived at Mount New Moon, they played for a while at the back of the mountain as usual. Then, Zhang Han began to refine pellets. There would be more pellets because more than 10 would be produced in one furnace. Because of the lower level, it was much easier to control. In the morning, Zhang Han refined 3 furnaces, and half of the spiritual herbs were left, which would be finished in the afternoon.